Dude, it's so weird making like an intro for like a YouTube video on like a stream. I feel so fucking awkward doing
Yeah,
shit like this where I'm like on
I don't,
stream and it's like, hey yo, let me do like a little intro then an outro for this and the stream just keeps going. It's
I
so
think you,
weird.
I think you just fucking rip it, Natty.
Oh
Just
no,
I don't know,
I'm
dude.
keeping this in too because it's fun, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a big fan of just like putting shit in Natty. Like I hate over edited stuff. It
Hmm.
just ruins the experience for me.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's just send it then. Keep it simple. No reason to go ahead. I guess we'll do our own little introductions and then we'll just kind of get into it. For me, my introduction is got CE in Nathria, Guild died, played Classic, came back to Dragonflight, and then I have been raiding since, and I'm now a trial for Infinity. You can go ahead, Mr. Zian.
Hello, I'm Xan. I've been playing Warrior since like Legion or some shit. Mythic rating since Nighthold. Hall of Fame like on and off since BFA. Kind of. I took a break for Shadowlands, and I have a special colored name in Skyhold.
Ooh. How about you, Mr. Gajeel?
What's up? Gajeel, I guess. That's what everyone knows me by my character name, but I've played the game since Cataclysm. Started raiding in Legion, and I've raided every raid tier since. And I currently raid in Vision.
Cool. Also, feel if you want to equip in stuff, feel free to just like hard send whatever you're feeling. I'm not
Sure.
we're not being too what's the right word? I don't know. We're not being
Formal.
formal. Yeah, formal's a good word. Um,
I'm
hmm?
Augers. I'm sure Gajeel will call me an idiot for my opinions once or twice. So
Don't worry, Mr. Furious Slash, we'll get there.
okay. Okay.
Oh, dude.
Fucking guy, man.
But I guess let's start off with just the class tree in general. The class, it feels really weird to me where I guess a lot of people were looking for a rework. A lot of like right now the way I look at it is like I see DH is happy, Rogue's happy, Monk's really happy.
Yeah.
Like when Walker with the changes they've been getting.
Oh, it looks sick.
But we didn't really receive a rework, even in Blizzard's own words through their forum post. It was more of a rearrangement. To me, at least, that tells me that they're working on it, but they're not done with it yet. Because I think we can definitely expect more,
I
some
think we
more
can.
stuff.
I
Well,
think
I
we can
certainly hope
expect
they're
more.
not done.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just said I certainly hope they're not done because
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
this is not a passing grade.
the one thing that feels very awkward to me about the current tree, as far as like feedback for them, is it feels pretty much static. Like there are probably some differences for PvP, right? When you're looking at like the piercing howl or berserker shout
Yeah.
nodes or endurance training instead of like wild strikes as like a PvP PvE difference. But one of the difficulties of it is they've obviously made things more accessible with where like shockwave and Stormbolt are and moving that up and changing those talents around, which I think is good, but it feels very awkward in the tree right now, where it almost feels like 99% of the tree is pretty much structured to give you points where they're going to go. And then you have a couple, like 2 points maybe if you're playing like Mountain Thane, because you're already taking the Thunderclap talents or you're taking those in AoE anyway.
Yeah.
Where you have like 2 points where it's like, I guess I'll take, I don't know, second wind and bitter immunity, maybe, because none of the other talents are like desirable. How do you
Yeah.
feel about the current stuff?
There's just like there's not enough compelling talents that compete with each other. Like pretty much everything is just kind of locked in. Like you path through things that you want, and the leftover points go to things that you are gonna take anyways. And like specifically in the middle part of the tree, it's just like you're taking random shit for the sake of it. There's just like not a lot of nodes to pick that are like actually compelling choices that are competitive with other ones. Like not only that, I mean the pathing just sucks too. The pathing is really bad.
The
Um
pathing is like large by far the biggest issue with the class
yeah.
tree more than any singular talent. Like I could go through and pick this apart all day about
Yeah.
why the pathing is bad or X talent shouldn't exist or
I
whatever or
think like
change.
just the best way to indicate how bad the pathing is like you either have to pass through Thunderclap, Shockwave, or a niche interrupt or a niche AoE talent in order to get your single target like DPS cooldown. Like ha- how do you make a talent tree and have that happen?
Yeah,
Not
what?
like
Oh, good.
yeah, there's a bunch of other problems too with like individual nodes, but like I think that specific area is kind of like the biggest problem. And there's
For
also stuff
PvE,
like overwhelming rage being 2 points for 30 rage cap, and it's like this is literally a quality of life point that you're using to soak up points in the tree. Like it's just to lower our point economy. I don't know. There's some
the
bad
point
shit.
economy is really bad too. Compared to a lot of other class trees, we have so many 2-point gates, it feels like.
I think we might have the most. Maybe DK has more because
DK's
they're
DK's
pretty
is pretty
doomed.
bad too.
Yeah,
But
because that that 20-point talent row might be the worst I've seen in every single tree because you have to obviously we've talked about where you've needed to unlock that 20-point talent row, you have to get stuff you don't really want. Something that might alleviate that in the short term, but maybe not even be like a real fix, is if you swap the Shockwave and Rally and Cry and their following nodes in locations, then you can get like all of your PvE focused stuff or like raid focused stuff where you can path
yeah,
into the armor and then the strength from the armor instead of having to take Shockwave for something like that.
yeah.
Um, but I
There is
think they're good.
there is kind of an easier fix, and that's just you make Thunderclap baseline. That like fixes the entire issue. You just like you can shuffle some points around or add a new one. It doesn't really matter, but making Thunderclap baseline fixes the entire issue.
Would you
At least in like
replace
that specific portion.
would you replace Thunderclap just with that Blood and Thunder slash Crackling Thunder node,
No,
just where it's
no,
at in the tree, or
you just
just
like you can keep that where it is. It's basically a free slot, right? Like you just put something new there, or you move something from the tree. You can. There's a bunch of stuff you can do, but making Thunderclap baseline is like the super obvious in your face solution. Like you make that baseline, put something else there, or like let's say War Machine. You just move War Machine and put it there, and the problem's fixed, right? Like you have a guaranteed straight line path down to your single target damage cooldown.
uh,
That's kind of another problem is that we have way too much throughput in our tree, but
one of the
yeah,
talents I find most weird out of all of them is Crushing Force because it only work as a class tree talent. Does
yeah,
proc
it's a bit
cast
cringe.
Slam like at
It's
all?
shield
No,
slam for
it,
them.
it for that talent it affects Shield Slam on
So
Pro.
why
Yeah,
wouldn't that affect like
Basically,
Bloodthirst? I feel like it should affect Bloodthirst for
well,
Fury.
basically with Annihilator being removed, which is good, but with that being removed, Storm of Swords is gone, so Fury will never ever push Slam, and this is completely dead. And for
yeah.
one of the three specs, and should just, I mean,
Realistically,
either
having it affect something like Whirlwind or Thunderclap or Bloodthirst would be better, but I
What?
don't know. That seems very likely to happen to
it's,
me.
I don't know, it's like hard to pick what it should affect because if it picks one, I can't. I don't know. It feels like it can't be either Bloodthirst or Raging Blood because they're trying to fix the balance. And then if they make this talent affect one of them, that goes against what they're trying to do.
Well, one
Unless
of
it's going to affect them both, but I don't think they would do that.
well, if they honestly, what they could do is, I think one of the things that makes makes Bloodthirst such an undesirable button in a lot of situations is the fact that the supporting talents in the Fury tree, like we don't have to go too deep into it yet, but the supporting talents in the Fury tree are really balanced around crit. So I wonder if that talent could be changed to something like maybe it's boring, right? But you could give like 5% to Bloodthirst and Raging Blow, and then just increase Bloodthirst base crit chance. So its supporting talents are at least more effective. Because right now, normally, at least most of the time, Fury's really been a haste mastery kind of class, right? So that kind of crit chance and talents that people like Cold Steel Hot Blood, don't really have a lot of support in the tree because it doesn't have a lot of innate crit, as well as taking something like Blood Craze, which does increase the crit every single time you cast it, doesn't really feel good to take because what that's leading to you currently is Deft Experience, which might be one of the worst talents in the Fury side of the
Yeah,
tree.
it's pretty bad. I don't
It's
want to like
also
delve in. Yeah,
it's also
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
previous design iterations ripped away and then put back in the talent tree to an
Um,
extent.
Alright, I pushed a little over to the Fury side, but back to the like main class tree. Definitely one of the difficulties I think of the tree right now is that 20-point node where 7 of your remaining, I think, 10 points are essentially guaranteed. You put 2 into wild strikes or PvP endurance training, 1 point into two-handed specialization, 1 point or 2 points into armor to the teeth for the strength from the armor, and then is it critical thinking? It's not critical thinking in the base tree. Is the name of the node, but it's the crit talents above
Cruel strikes.
thunder cruel
Cool
strikes
strikes.
above thunderous roar. But that's 7 of your. That's basically most of your points already, and then it's like, all right, well, you're going to take Avatar because you're obviously going to take Avatar, and then you're going to whether or not you're going to take the follow-up node, depending on its current strength, versus just you're either going to go roar or spear. It seems very locked in, and a lack of choice. Because one of the things
Yeah.
that I noticed about Max when he was or Liquid Maximum, where he was playing with his talent tree, and he goes, "Oh, I just have a point here that I can do whatever with," and I'm just sitting here going, "Man, that sounds
Yeah.
nice. That sounds nice to pick like a niche like." I think they had points where they could like do a little hop after a roll or something like that. But having a point that was more in the class trees, especially having some actual flavor instead of just a lot of throughput in every single node sounds like a lot more fun.
Yeah, the warrior tree, like literally all of them, right? Like Prot, Fury, Arms, and the class tree just scream uninspired to me. Like we're pretty much just getting a bunch of shit that we've already had that are like crucial to warrior identity in the past. And they just like kind of slap them into places. We pretty much got nothing new. Like certainly very little. A lot less than other classes. And yeah, I don't know. It's just there's just a bunch of stuff and it's there, and arbitrarily some of them cost 2 points. Like the ones that scream uninspired the most to me are obviously very obviously the stat nodes. Just percent increase on a stat and like some random minor benefit. Granted, wild strikes is like kind of insane.
Yeah,
Like the
Wild
20%
strikes is
attack
pretty
speed
good.
is
literally,
nuts.
it's literally the only good one.
Yeah, but like the rest are, it's just bad. And like specifically endurance training, I have a problem with because it's like I'm probably gonna reference the paladin tree a lot, but like this, we just have sanctified plates broken up into like 3 different talents.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. Like we have endurance training. It's endurance training, armored plates, and then the what's the where is it? Is it seasoned soldier? Yeah, seasoned soldier. It's just like the 10% avoidance for arms that they get baseline. It's just all of those crammed into a 2 point node, and it's like this is insane. Not seasoned soldier. Where is it? Oh my god, I can't remember what it's called.
Well, you're talking, yeah, because it's in the arms tree specific. Well, it's not even in
It
the
is
arms
seasoned
tree.
soldier.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, it is.
it's
It's
just a
just
spec passive.
yeah, it's just 10% DR given to arms because it doesn't have a second two-hander. But I find things like that very odd where the class talent tree is a very easy way, like they even did with the Blood and Thunder and Crackling Thunder talent, where they took it away for Fury because it just doesn't make sense, right? So I think there's a lot more room for talents like those in the class tree that can be spec specific. Like you don't even need to choice note it; it can just literally be something different. Because on that line, I guess the next thing to go to is obviously like we've talked about, they've added nothing new to these talent trees, right? It's
Yeah.
quite literally everything that we had in the previous seasons, or even just in Dragonflight, but now it's just there.
The
It's they
Yeah,
shuffled it
there's
around a
nothing.
little bit, but I mean, we're still doing the same puzzle. We're just missing pieces.
And also the new talent that they came out with well, for Dragonflight, bitter immunity is like the most useless piece of shit. It's insane. Like the pick, and obviously there's maybe a 1%, like less than 1% scenario where this is actually useful, and that's it.
And that's even for
It feel
PvPers.
it's 3 minutes for a 20% heal. Like that. I get that it removes debuffs on you, but like for on a 3 minute, that like it, it's just bad. Like
I feel like the only way you could justify a 3 minute cooldown is by actually having it say like it removes bleeds on you. And
Yeah,
even then
it
it's like still pretty bad.
because
I
even
mean,
then that's like a
if
double dwarf passive,
well,
right?
I mean
Yeah.
specifically for Prot, like that would be
It would
That
be
would
pretty
make it
good.
really that would make it really good for prop because that's like its biggest weakness outside of magic damage is bleeds because you can't block bleeds. So being able to remove that yourself if you don't have an evoker in the group is pretty good. But out of the entirety of Dragonflight, I think I've spec'd Bitter Immunity one time, and it was for the first boss in Algathar as a tank when I didn't have someone that could dispel me.
Yeah, because I
Yeah,
think
that's literally it. Like,
because bringing in new talents, like one of my speaking of evokers as well, one of my random ideas is even in PvP, I don't really see people taking Berserking Shout as a node, right? Yeah, it removes fear and sap effects, so I guess it does have on
It's
players,
just a
but
worse
it
tremor.
seems yeah,
That's kind of the
it's
it
issue.
seems way
also
worse. Sorry, go ahead.
it's still going into the next expansion as in live. It shares a choice node with Piercing Hell. Piercing Hell is just
It's just so
You're just gonna
infinitely
take Piercing Howl for PvP.
like
yeah.
yeah, pretty
'Cause-
much. Like it's just insanely good for PvP, whether you're trying to catch up someone that's kiting you or you're trying to prevent people from leaving you to switch to your healer or whatever.
Is this
Piercing Owl
new?
is
Did
just
they?
that's
I
another thing
s-
too. Is the sorry, but just like the list is a little bit of food for the PvPers here. This is also a horrendous change for them. Throwing the Piercing Howl and Berserker Shout choice node like so far down the tree instead of towards the top where it was is so bad for them. Specifically, like this doesn't really do much to us, the PvEers, but the PvP guys, I can imagine, are not happy about this.
Yeah, because I one of the things that also is very weird, like you look at another, I guess, PvP more focused talent, which would be the one that reduces your pummel cooldown, but it makes the enemy take percent damage increase from you as
It's
well. Yeah.
concussive blows.
Um.
So choice node with reverb now, so it's probably going to see some kind of play in
Yeah.
PvE to an extent. Like any fight where you probably can kick on cooldown, it's gonna be good.
Yeah. Or
But
like in Denathrius, where if you kick the ad you did, you do more damage. Because we do have that availability of points. Because they did provide us some extra stuff. I just think what we have to pick from isn't very good. Like
no,
um
and
like one of my
yeah,
ideas was essentially an AoE soothe for warriors, and as far as like thematically is concerned, literally you would just do a war cry, and then anybody near you would like. There's already the whole cower and fear thing on the on one of the I think the menace node off of
yeah.
intimidating
Yeah.
shout. But even then, I don't think it should be cowering fear. It's like you literally intimidate everybody around you
I
that
still will
they
never understand. Go ahead.
no, I just say it was just like basically it's just an AoE soothe. For to provide warriors some kind of utility that's thematic. Because one thing that
Mm.
is difficult is they like to keep things very thematic, like we see in the hero talents. But I find it, but for a class that's entire talent tree is well, the most magical our class has been is Thunderclap, and we got an entire hero talent revolved around it because of the Mountain Thane from like Warcraft 3, right? So where are we thematically going to have any magical effects within our class tree? They even changed Odin Fury from fire to physical as to fit even better with it. But what were you going to get say?
I just like to make it even better because an AoE soothe is nice. It's only useful on X Mythic Plus week for the most part, and this currently exists in the prot tree. It doesn't have a huge pick rate, but it's disrupting shout from Mop, where it's just basically an AoE kick, and that would just be
Yeah.
insanely
I feel like that.
way
Yeah.
better. But
That
I
should.
get why they don't give it back because of the game revolving so much around keys these days, and it's just like that would be fucking nuts for
Well,
Mythic
Yeah.
Plus.
well, I think that would
See,
be really. Sorry, go
Or
ahead.
I
but
kind of agree. Like, oh yeah, they'll probably never give it to Warrior, but I don't think it's because it would be too insane. Because, like, obviously it's not.
it's
If
it's not
DH
a
can
yeah.
survive with its 20-second like AoE silence shit,
Well,
like
that's the thing.
it's just like a
I mean
they
that's
have
kind of
such a
where that
resistance to
comes from.
wanting to. Yeah, it's just such a resistance to
We
like wanting
we
to
just
make
have
Warrior good ever.
we have so many good utility pieces that aren't in the game anymore that they could bring back that are really good. Like obviously disrupting shout being one of them is really good. Piercing Hell is still in the game, but it also cannot be you can't have 100% uptime on it anymore, so that's kind of why you don't ever play it. Plus kite meta isn't nearly as potent as it has been in the past. Another good like Safeguard doesn't exist in the class tree anywhere. I think it's a PvP talent,
Yeah,
so
that's
it's
PvP
only to
talent.
PvPers. Uh, I don't particularly want this back because it's more micromanagement, but Vigilance is basically a tank external
Hmm.
or just an external that you can give to somebody. And I mean, we saw how it went when they kind of brought it back in Shadowlands with mass spell reflection being broken, of course. But I mean, we have so many good things from the past that we just don't have anymore.
Well,
And
Yeah.
some of these things other classes have,
yeah. Well,
but
the thing that I find weird, like we talked about Silent Sigil from DH, if they gave, let's say they gave Warrior that interrupting shout as a vice versa to like a choice node with Piercing House, it'd be like the PvE and the PvP, and it could be useful in PvP in some situations. But I feel like it would be more interesting if you got that and then Prot, instead of having disrupting shout as their node, they could have a choice node there that could literally just do what Silent Sigil does, which is just silence everything. Um, which is just silence everything in an AOE so they can actually
yeah,
group things. Because,
that's actually where there's an unbalance there for sure.
well, the one
Because
thing I feel like they're working against, they're quote unquote working against like homogenization is what everybody like people boogeyman that word a lot in terms of like of content, but I feel like what else are you gonna do? Like, are they
Well,
gonna give
to,
Spear like a mass grip or something? Like, it just feels
I don't
weird where they need that kind of tool.
I understand the homogenization argument, but why is Warrior the only one suffering from it? Like, we're the only class that's getting shafted like this, legitimately. Maybe DK is too. Like, but I mean, DK's been pretty hellish for like 2 expansions. So
I mean, Rhett was pretty much horrible for the long time too, but they finally
yeah, no,
got what they
exactly.
needed. So like no like flame to them because they needed it, but
It's just like why is their own? I don't know. It's just felt bad this entire expansion to be like, oh yeah, everyone else gets to have fun except Warrior.
and
Like we're the only one that doesn't get cool broken shit, pretty
and
much.
I do appreciate the shockwave fix. Like I've been bitching about this for I mean ever since Legion. Like I remember they took it away and it's like, okay, we're going into BFA and I lose my I lose my AoE stun, but DH and Monk get to keep theirs. Like what kind of bullshit is that? But you know, it is what it is. I do appreciate that fix for sure. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a nice one for sure. Especially how
it's
easy
nice
it is to get Rumbling Earth, get like the CDR, and like I
and
see, I
it's good.
I
Good.
yeah, I've heard a lot of people like complain about or not complain, but like say like, oh yeah, Rumbling Earth bad because
But
you just DR things faster. But it's like that's like not the full value of CDR. It's not like you need to be using it on CD to get the value. It's like if you have
yeah,
Shockwave when you otherwise wouldn't, then you're getting value out of it, and it's really sick.
it's also just a good thing for PvPers too, because
Yeah, for sure.
especially in RBGs, like Shockwave is really good.
well, moving
I mean,
over.
RBG is
Yeah,
cool, but
sorry. Yeah. Well, moving from, I guess we basically kind of talked about the Warrior Tree, how
Oh yeah,
constricted
fuck
out.
uh,
Elysian Might. That shit needs to die. Champions
the
Might is bad and needs to get removed from the game.
and before we
Or
go, like I have like personally some ideas on what they can do that has nothing to do with shifting, but what they can replace.
Well, I
And
mean,
personally,
go right into
the
it.
biggest one, the biggest one that I have, and I'm sure other people have thought of this too, is we have a talent that exists in every spec tree that is generally played by all three specs, and that's anger management. Why is anger management that is something that is used by all three specs in each class tree? And basically, what that's doing, on top of just being cringe, is it's soaking up potential innovation in those specific spec trees because it's taking a talent point that we're all playing. So why not just put it in the general tree? Same thing to my with my opinion of Bladestorm and Ravager. All three specs have access to this stuff except for Bladestorm on Prot. Why is this not in the general tree?
Because they could
Like
easily just
I
make it not
so
selectable for Prot.
that's pretty much what I want. I mean, I also want Bladestorm back on Prot. That was fun back in the day. I mean, I get why some people don't like it, but whatever. I think it's cool.
Well, there has been that data mined. Who knows how real it is of the Gladiator. People reminiscent of Gladiator stance coming back, where you have a shield and a two hander. potentially
I would
moving
say.
Bladestorm into the main tree and then
but
and then having Gladiator as something
like
that proc can use might be good.
like I'm a pipe dreamer, and I want just this one thing back from Warlords of Draenor, which is being able to have Bladestorm and Ravager in the same build. But I know it's realistic that they're never going to do that, but at least just move that choice node into the class tree where you can then replace those appropriate nodes in the spec trees with new stuff like anger management, Bladestorm Ravager, and just a lot of that shared, class stuff. Like that's what the class tree is supposed to be, is that there are tools that all three specs can access. And I mean, my main alt is a DK, so I don't really see that level of like this talent being in all three of their spec trees that just should be in the general tree. I've only really seen that on Warrior, and it's something, and this is stuff that, as far as I can tell, most people like. Most people like anger management. Obviously, there's some people that don't like it, but generally, when I look, I see most people enjoy it, or they at least like the gameplay loop of it, of having cooldowns all the time, which is generally really good in the game too. So
Yeah, because
those are just my two takes on that stuff, specifically those two core gameplay elements that are also being heavily pushed going into the War Within with, Mountain Thane playing with Ravager, which is available to two of the three specs. Same thing with Bladestorm and Anger Management being a part of all that.
Ravagers for all three now.
Well, I just mean like
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
the
well,
Valajar
you
training
can't play.
talent that reduces the cooldown for Mountain
Yeah,
Thane, you mean?
I just mean you can't play Mountain Thane arms, even though it can get
Yeah, yeah.
Ravager.
Yeah.
Fair, sure.
But like, since all three specs can play it, like, why is this stuff just
Yeah.
not in the general tree? And then obviously, most people don't like Elysian Might. It's just not fun. Like they fixed this problem on another spec for the same reason we complain about it, and we're still dealing with it as a melee. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
Rune
it's
of
awful.
Power
Like,
being
and
the akin.
I as much as I hate Spear, and I would, if it was up to me, I would just delete it from the game. Like, I would just rather see it be put into PvP talent, because that's literally what they designed it for in the first place, was for PvP. They've said this, and that's fine. That's like, I get it. They make a game for like 18 different groups of people, so they got to design around that. And Spear was built around PvP, so just let the PvPers have it, and there you go. I know, and they obviously should fix it in PvP as well, because it doesn't even, like, most classes can just get out of it, so they don't even play it. I think it's barely seen any play in Dragonflight PvP, so
Yeah, I mean,
they could
so
also fix that.
I generally get 2100 every season. Well, at least the last two seasons that I played, because I want the weapon enchant. Um, and there's basically like no reason to run it. Like even on my hotbars, I don't even have Fear Laugh on my PvP hotbar because everybody just moves out of the most of the damage, which is the final cone, right?
Yeah,
Um, and it's kind of the same thing with Spear, where maybe they could look at it as like, oh well, you can use it to get like a big demolish combo or something in PvP, but realistically, like you said, everyone can just hop out of it or do whatever, and it's not really a problem. I think if they added an ability, well, I think the PvP talent system is perfect for adding something like Elysian's Might, where it lasts longer and actually locks players in. Um, which I think a lot of PvPers would probably be happy with, because I think even now most PvPers are still running Roar. They're not even running
yeah.
Spear because there's just no
The flat
point.
bleed damage from Thunderous Words just completely blows away the damage of Spear, even given the utility part. Because, like I said too, most classes can just get out of it. Like, you Spear a Warlock, they can gate report you know, whatever. Like, I think DKs can walk out of it with just DA. Um, I think any kind of disengage works to get out of it. It's just,
I'm pretty. You
I
can
need
just
some.
freedom it, right? Like,
You can freedom it. Like, there's so many tools to get out of it, so it definitely could use some love in the PvP department. But that's the other thing people use for Spear as an argument in PvE. It's like, oh, it can lock down mobs. Well, with how it's tuned, and given Elysian Might is tuned so much around just like our actual damage, like, that's, yes, it
it's
is
not
realistic
real.
to just give up that much damage for that set of utility. But like, give me one example of any fight in the last 2 years where you actually saved or sat on your spear for a minute or longer to do that. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, there's
The one
just
boss where spear actually saw useful for the tether mechanic was purely on Razageth in the second intermission. with the 3-storm elementals and all the little ads
Yeah, the
walking
little
to each
babies.
other's side. Where as soon as the DK mask rips, you spear them and they all get trapped with like leg sweep and all that stuff. But even then, like
You don't
I
need
mean, for
spear.
my
You
guild,
just do
like
whatever.
for my guild in Prague, that shit died before it could even get tethered in the first place. So like, it really didn't even do anything. But like, that is like the one example where that could be the case.
Yeah,
But
it's
even
like
then, the cooldowns
that's
lined up generally, and that's how you played the fight anyway, because you were using it to. You mean it's because if you're gonna sit on your spear, you might as well just hold all your cooldowns because that's just how it is.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
not doing
It's
damage without all of them anyways.
like exactly.
And
So
like
there you go.
the other thing is like that's the best case scenario and it happened one time this entire expansion.
It's one
Every
time.
other situation is detrimental. Like the chance of you incidentally spearing ads on like a sanguine week, which doesn't happen anyways because it's bad in Mythic Plus compared to Roar, but like it it's
Well,
just
Roar's
way
just been
worse
buffed.
ever than it's gonna be good. And
Roar's
yeah,
just been buffed so many times that it just like if you want to wind the clock back to season 1 of Dragonflight, like Spear was much closer and to
yeah,
Roar and
of
Plus.
course.
Like I generally played most keys with Spear because it was better priority damage for bosses. And yeah, you lose some like honestly like the only dungeon that I really ever played Roar in was Algathar just for that first pull because like obviously like it's fun. I get that. Like hitting Roar on 50 mobs is fun because it does a lot of damage, but season 1 before all the buffs to it, it really wasn't as potent as it is now.
Well,
And that
even
goes for
with
both specs.
yeah, even going into season 2 with the buffs it received, wasn't Roar the AoE talent within like 500 DPS of Spear with
It
the
was
season
really
2
close.
set?
It was close, and
Yeah.
just they buffed it again. They buffed the damage again, which just made the get. I mean, granted, those buffs were over positives, yes, like because then it shoved Spear further down in the meta to where you really only play it in raid now, which is good. They basically kicked it out of the plus, which is good.
Yeah.
So
And yeah.
Is so I guess
just
Spear bad. We don't like Spear.
yeah,
And like the main reason I don't like it is like I don't mind having the tether mechanic, and I don't particularly mind Spear as an ability. I don't love it, but like really the main thing is Elysian Might. But it's like
having
the
to
fact
stand
that
in it.
the
it's the rune
fact
of power effect.
the
Yes.
Rune of Power sucks, but I don't like having incidental utility tied to my throughput option. If you're gonna give us the tether, like make it its own talent. I'm fine with that. I don't really care.
Because nobody takes the 50% increased damage on
Oh no,
activation
that's
talent.
bad. That
So
that also needs to go.
honestly, what they could do is just make the tether meet as a capstone ender. It's still not great, but making the tether be one part of it and extended duration for PvP, and then making bonus damage. Honestly, that maybe the easiest way they could like band-aid fix it is if you stepped into the zone, you literally just got a buff for the duration, so you're gonna get it anyway, but if you just got a buff, I mean, it's boring. It's not great. Nobody would like it anyway, but it would be better than what it is. Just a
That
buff
would be
for
a
crit
huge
damage.
over. Yeah, like there's been annoying amounts of bosses where like or just any boss that can happen if your tank just pulls the boss away or what.
Yeah,
It's just annoying. Like
I'm
I don't
worried
get why
about.
they did this for a range class that has infinitely more visibility than any melee, and they fixed it for them, but they just I don't know.
I'm
I'm not saying like oh
also
melee's hard, but it's just cringe.
imagine bosses being pulled out of your demolish because it's like Firelap, right?
Oh,
Where
it's gonna be cringe.
a lot of the
But
damage is based into the cone at the end, but you're actually not like consistently following your target. You get locked into place when you cast it. Suppose they said it's hasted now, so it's not going to be
It
nearly
is,
as
yeah.
it's not
It's
going
like
to
a
be nearly as bad.
it's like a 1.3 to 1.5 second channel. The
But
change
I
that
could
I've
see it
seen a lot of
happening
people say to like fix quote unquote demolish, I don't think it particularly needs to be fixed, but like just to make it feel not as shit. Like don't make it root you, but make it apply like a 90% debuff to your movement speed
kind of
or
like
something
Fell
like that.
Devastation.
Yeah, so like at least you can like tiptoe, while you're using it, but you're not like, running at
one of
Mach
those.
speed doing like 700% AP
It's
damage.
one of those things. Demolish is probably going to feel a little bad at the beginning when we don't have gear, but as we get, even just like by the end of season 1, it's probably going to be fine with the amount of haste that you'll have.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess is there as far as like the base class also the reason why I'm kind of structuring it as in like focusing on the class tree, then the hero talents, then the specs themselves is because the developers themselves asked us to try and at least like narrow vision or feedback, because obviously we've ping ponged to other specs and different
Yeah.
stuff while talking about it. But that's kind of why I'm somewhat structuring it that way, because like, okay, well, if we can keep some structure here, we don't. It at least does that. Is
Exactly.
there
Yeah.
is there anything else in? Because I know you mentioned that it would be good and probably more refreshing in the warrior class tree to have something like Bladestorm Ravager and their follow up talents and or anger management, that kind of thing in the talent tree itself. Is there anything you would want as a potential addition to the base tree before we moved on to hero
Bloodbath.
talents?
Instantly bloodbath.
Just like if just remove spear and put bloodbath there. And if people that don't know what bloodbath is, it's just an old cooldown from I think they put it in the game in MOP,
Yeah,
and
I
it
think so.
existed through Legion. It's just a 12-second buff that makes your attacks deal 30% more damage as a bleed. So it's basically just 30% more damage in a more flavorful way
So it's
through a
kind of
bleed.
like ignite, but for like wounds.
It's
Yeah,
kind of
it
like it's
it does ignite.
like an ignite. Yeah, it snapshots like that, where it's based off the amount of damage you do, and every time you do damage, it changes. So it's like ignite.
All right.
Yeah, that'd be
So
sick. The other thing is like this is like a pretty common suggestion. Replace spear with blood of the enemy.
That's another
Blood of the
one
enemy
that
was a BFA essence that it increased like it basically just big pulse of damage to like I think it was like 10 yards or something, and it applied a debuff that increased your crit strike damage and crit strike chance by 25% against affected targets. And I'm
I think
pretty sure it was uncapped too.
the debuff was the increased crit chance, and then it gave a buff on you that gave the crit damage for five
Yeah.
seconds. The debuff lasted 10.
is
Basically, it's like functionally the same as spear. It does mostly the same thing. It's just a lot more forgiving towards the player.
is
It loses
there?
the
Sorry, go ahead.
tether part. It just loses the tether part to do blood of the enemy instead, but it makes it like infinitely easier to use. And the only like argument to that can really you can throw at it is that it's effectively the same thing and just like the same thing as roar. It's just an AoE around you, except this one doesn't deal a bleed. It just makes
Yeah.
you do more damage to them instead.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any interest in a return to banners at all, or do you think players did not like that, even though they were somewhat thematic? Do you think the player base would be interested in in banners as a potential replacement for something like spear?
I think people like banners. I think if banners came back, people would not like them because just like the way the game has evolved, like people are way more sweaty about group buffs and
Are you,
shit.
are you talking about Skull Banner or are you talking about Necrolord Banner?
Uh, I mean, just banners in general. I mean, because there's the skull banner that you place down in PvP. They still have the talent where you can place down a banner that reduces. I think it's
CC, yeah.
reduces CC and crowd control effects. But
Yep.
but do you think there's any interest in just because obviously banners can be restrictive in their area? Do you think there's any interest in that at all, like thematically, or it should just be a debuff applied to things in range?
Skull Banner, there's a reason why they didn't follow through with it. I don't think it's healthy for the game, and I anything party wide is just a no no in my book. Like, for the love of God, Blizzard, please fucking give every class, every spec of a shaman Wind Fury, please, and make it
Um,
raid wide. Like,
Imagine
it's
the hero talent they haven't released is just a choice node where all it does is it makes your main weapon like is it just basically makes your class like a moving Wind Fury totem, so you don't have to drop it, and then it just gives it because the one they haven't released is between Ellie and
yeah,
enhancement.
I don't know.
Imagine they
Like
just give instead of fixing Ellie, they just give Ellie the ability to just
Wind
essentially
Fury,
be a
yeah.
Wind Fury totem instead.
the
I,
yeah,
pretty
so
band aid,
just
but
obviously like Blizzard has made it clear the buff myth thing is here to stay. Like they're not getting rid of PI, they're not getting rid of Wind Fury. Rogue had something that was going to be party wide that was
Oh
out of
god, that
mind
was
in Dragon.
so AIDS. Oh my
Whatever that I don't remember what the hell it was called. Going to
Restless
Dragonflight,
Blades.
Rogues were going to get some party wide buff that would have been completely broken and just unfun because I, the only thing that really stands out that obviously is going to stay that most people don't like is PI, and that's just a one person thing. But all these like party wide things, they just need to make they either need to just scrap them or they need to just make them raid wide because it's frustrating to to not have this stuff, especially when your class revolves around it, and when that class is not in the raid or you're not in that group, because Wind Fury is pretty competitive. It just like how is that fun for anybody?
Or
They
or
also,
just or just imagine you have more than 4 melee classes that would want it, right?
Yeah.
Like just
Well, I mean, that
like
was a
even
problem
even
this raid
even
too,
tanks
right?
want it.
Like,
Like they're like some of the tanks in my
on
like one of the
things
tanks
like
in my previous
brewmasters.
guild like went into the Wind Fury group to try and parse, right? Like even
It,
tanks want this stuff. So
it's really good on like Prot Warrior, and I think Monk like maybe not Monk. I think it's Guardian that I'm thinking of that really likes it. It's decent on
yeah.
DK, but the other thing they could do to fix this issue is if you have multiple shamans, if every shaman has access to this in the class tree. I mean, we're
Well,
kind of
just
getting off topic with this, but like, yeah, Skull Banner is a no
I
for
think
me.
there's room for banners that are like,
It's
because
too toxic.
there's multiple banners in MOP, right? There's like, wasn't there one that gave move speed?
This mocking banner,
Oh,
well,
I mean,
I
okay.
think going
Well,
off topic
regardless,
it
I
seems
think
pretty good.
and there's mocking banner and demoralizing banner, and I'm pretty sure they, if I remember right, it shared a cooldown. They all shared a
I
cooldown, so you
see.
can only put one of them down. I don't remember that for sure. But basically, in PvE, you just like in a raid, you put Skull
You
Banner
just
down. If you're doing PvP, you could throw down either a Mocking Banner or a Demo Banner, and you could intervene it. So it's like another gap closer, but they got rid of that. So
I
uh,
think
I don't
if
want any of that back personally. And
if they were
next,
to bring banners back, I think they would have to do it for like pure utility. Like, if you gave us like a movement speed banner or some shit, that would probably be fine. I don't think anyone would be mad about that.
basically
Like,
giving us whatever the
Windrush
hell that
totem.
triggered, Windrush or Stampeding
yeah,
Roar,
yeah, pretty
giving it
much.
to Warrior, that would be probably fine. But any kind
Do
of
we,
throughput, no.
yes, any throughput is bad. We do not like that.
Yeah.
And Necrolord banner is very stale. You just put a flag on your back, and I get mastery and strength. Like it's just another cooldown that doesn't do anything interesting. And people can argue that Bloodbath doesn't do anything interesting, but like that kind of ties more thematically to, you know, making people bleed as a warrior. You know,
Yeah,
that makes more sense, and
and it
is
provides more. I guess I would say it
it
also would give
also
more skill expression.
it had that back in that time it had more of a skill interaction there, and another thing too that was kind of cool in PvP if you did play it in PvP is it slows targets. So people that have bloodbath bleed on them are slowed by 50%. That was another like piece of that. But I'd be fine without the movement speed part. I just want another cooldown or something that I just the spear just has got to go. Like it's
Yeah, I haven't heard many people that actually enjoy it. One of my worries is I don't know if Spear is going to go,
Probably
considering they
not.
just did a VFX
I
pass
don't
on
think
it, right? So I think that's like, okay, we're gonna keep this. I
Yeah,
mean,
at this point, it's
obviously,
just stemming the bleeding. Get rid of Elysian Might. That's fine.
yeah,
Put
yeah.
like the
Or the
put
power
like
part.
the animate diffuser back in or some shit. The one that reduces CDR or that one that gives CDR based on targets hit.
The Mechanicos thing.
Yeah, I
um,
think that's like not leagues better in terms of actual like throughput value, but in terms of gameplay and like enjoyment, that is significantly better than EM. And it also sort of matches the CDR from Roar, which is nice.
is
They could make it
there
more competitive with that, yeah.
is there anything? So I guess as a last thing before moving towards hero talents, is there anything you would want to see added specifically? Like I already started this question before, but then we kind of tailed off to other stuff, which is totally fine. But as far as the base warrior class tree is outside of AM and then Bladestorm Ravager, because those are seen everywhere, is there anything specific you'd want for the class tree, or have you kind of
Um,
said your piece on it?
this is sort of like multiple choice, but it's like one of Blood of the Enemy or Bloodbath, and then I don't know, just like some more utility for warrior that's like actually unique and like powerful, like a movement speed banner, you know, like shit
That
like
could be
this.
used. That could be useful, but I think really what it needs the most of right now is pathing fixes more than anything.
Yeah, pathing fixes are big. Disrupting show would be nice in the class tree too. I don't think that's like too insane to ask. Like it's a 1.5 minute
Also,
CD. Like
it would
what are we
also,
doing?
I mean, at least in MOP, it did share a cooldown with your regular kick, so you couldn't just disrupting shout and then pummel at the same time. If you use disrupting shout, it would put your normal kick on cooldown, and that had a 40-second CD in MOP. They could increase that to like 1 minute, in or something like that in the current game, and it would be fine. But it shared a cooldown with your other kicks, so you can just double kick somebody or a mob,
Yep.
which
Speak.
I
Yeah.
mean DH can do, but you know.
Well, speaking of utility, going into the Colossus tree, haha,
Aha.
segues. Haha. Going into the Colossus tree, I think one of my most, I wouldn't necessarily say desired, but one of the most like strong talents is the one where Shockwave knocks up because
Yeah. Yeah.
knockups are a undr'able CC in the game. Obviously, depending on what dungeon you're doing this season or in the previous seasons, Ret Pally being so prevalent, Wake of Ashes just stunned. DH is very strong, remains very strong. Didn't see any tank balancing yet, so DH has their own stun. There are a lot of stuns in the game, and having a knock-up effect, regardless of the stun, is actually an undr'able effective amount of CC given to our class through Colossus, moving into that tree specifically, which I think is really interesting. Um, but one of the things I feel that Colossus has more so than the other trees, we can talk about all the trees. It doesn't have to be specifically Colossus. But one thing Colossus really feels like is it gives you your big button in Demolish, but otherwise it just enhances what you're already doing. Um, Slayer and Mountain Thane are doing their own kind of specific thing, which I think is fine. But I know a lot of people are already, me included, looking at Colossus going, "Oh, well, it's it's giving it." It's kind of weird where it's boring, right? Where it's just giving us damage. There's the 5% damage node, the overpower and raging just like the overpower node as you get colossal mic stacks, the bleed buff, even the AoE increase from one against many, where you just do more damage the more targets you hit. Um, which I think is fine. But I find it, while very good, probably the most bland of the three trees in terms of everything but the 5% character increase.
Yeah, it's definitely like pretty boring, but I don't necessarily mind it because like as long as Demolish feels good to press, you don't really care.
And
So like
God,
yeah, I personally I don't have a problem with like the structure of it just being simple passives that like feed damage into demolish and otherwise like when demolish is on cooldown just makes your other stuff more powerful even if it's passive. Like yeah, sure, they could do it a bit more interesting, right? Like they could make your stuff do like multiple hits or something, but like at the end of the day it boils down to the same thing. It's just a percent damage increase, right? Like
Yeah, instead of power, I would rather. I kind of want. I just like having more flavor, and I almost think that obviously Avatar gives us like a little bit of a discoloration to our character when used, but I almost think, as far as flavor is concerned, if you're a Colossus, I think it should actually go a bit further and almost like make your character like a stone appearance, which might be weird considering the Earthern coming into the game, right?
yeah,
Maybe that
that's
might
kind of what
overlap too
Avatar does
much.
though, right? Like
Yeah,
it turns
no.
your guy gray and you look rocky poggers.
Yeah,
um
I guess I just kind of, a
I
lot of the
agree. The
flavor of
flavor is kind of
Colossus.
lacking,
Yeah.
but I think they've also said that like they're still kind of working on making the like visual appearance of things like
Yeah, because
actually
like
flavorful.
if they make, like, we've seen the animation, but if they make the actual VFX of like Demolish itself just own, that's just gonna feel good, right? Does
Yeah,
big damn,
it's
you're
gonna
gonna
be
like
better.
pressing. The cool VFX, you're gonna feel good. So I feel like it's pretty close.
it demolishes basically just Fearlath without the cool animation. Like
Yeah.
the swings are like almost the same, but there's no like flashy. So I get that, but and just like the counter and just like the overall like passive damage throughput in the tree is like I feel like that's offset because Colossus is giving you an actual button where most of the hero stuff I've looked at, it's all passive. Like Slayer's all passive stuff, Thane's all passive stuff. Like this is giving you an actual extra button, which kind of adds to Arm's button bloat problems enough already. But
Well, do you think some
it's
of? Sorry, go ahead.
it's just it gives you an extra button to actually use, whereas most of the trees do not. Like the only other thing that I've looked at personally that actually gives you another button is Deathbringer, because that's the only other class I really play.
Do you
So
think that one of the reasons why Colossus has been given not only the 5% passive that was buffed from Mountain of Skin, like Mountain of Muscle and Scars, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
Because that was buffed from 2.5 to 5, and then obviously while channeling Demolish, you get 10%, and then with 10 stacks, you get another 10% for 10 seconds after. Do you think these were given to arms specifically as kind of a band-aid for the fact that it doesn't have the two-handed the second two-hander of Stam that Fury does, as well as it doesn't, as they want you to press Bloodthirst, even though it's somewhat minor, healing 3% your max health in a button in your rotation is still pretty good, right?
It's nice, yeah.
It's
And
definitely a part of it for sure.
there's something they could do to fix this, even on the Fury side, because like on live, I still have like I think Ret Paladins on average still have more health than I do as Fury with two-handed, giving all that stamina because they have so much shit in their class tree that gives them that stuff.
Because I
So
think
it's
it's
like
just
there's
sanctified plates. Just
Yeah,
they
Sanctified
even
Plates is
well,
just
the funny
like
thing
easily the most broken single talent node in the game.
Well, the funny
It's
thing
just insane.
is, Ret
but
Paladin has an insane amount of representation for very obvious reasons. Like disregarding its quote unquote ease of play, even just thematically, Ret Paladin has a ton in rating of. I think it's like the first or second most played class in
I
terms
mean
of
even
like rating
before
statistics.
even before the rework, which made it good, like Red Paladin was still one of the most played specs. Like even before they fixed it, for the last like Ret has been one of their it's been one of the most popular specs for like a decade.
Yeah,
Even if it has
because
had high representation and rating for a long time, until now it's been one of the most popular. So
one of the things that happened to Holy Paladin is because of the God comp at the end at the latter half of season 2. Um, Holy Paladin actually got a straight up nerf to Sanctified Plates before, like Ret didn't get changed, Prot didn't get changed, but Holy Paladin specifically had their Sanctified Plates nerfed because of their sheer strength in season 2 with the rest of those classes.
Yeah, they should have just nerfed it for all three specs. That talent node is disgusting.
I
Because
mean, yeah, like Ret would be fine with that. I know we're not
I
talking
see
about.
talents like that, and then I see talents like what happened with Strength of Arms in the arms tree, where they took a talent,
And just broke
they
it in
cut it in
half.
half, and now neither part are worth taking, and now it's just dead.
It's
Like
just yeah,
Like
it's
that pretty
so
much
confusing.
generally that kind of sums up the warrior changes is where's the new stuff.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
So
yeah, you're just like recycling old shit pretty much.
which I
like
definitely have faith that based on what they've done for other classes, there is certainly some cook left for warrior.
Yeah, I mean, there fucking better be. See, this is I'm sorry, I'm gonna go off on a tangent here, but
Yeah,
like
go for it.
this is my main concern with Warrior is that when they put like I saw the changes and I'm like I mean personally I tried to get excited because I'm an optimistic person and I like seeing new shit. But like man, was it hard to get excited about that shit. And like at first you're thinking, okay, surely this isn't like all they have. And then the next day they posted the dev update, and it seems like they're just happy with what they did. It's like you had the sandcastle that was already kind of mediocre, and then some kid comes over, fucking kicks the tower over, and says, "Yeah, it's better now. Have fun." Um, like I don't know, man. It's just there better be more left in the tank, otherwise this will like go down in history as like one of the
it's
worst reworks, quote unquote, ever.
Well,
it's like to
that's
keep
why
it
I think
polite.
there's
It's like
much left. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, it's just like trying to be polite about it is it's kind of hard when it's just it's g- it's I don't think it's 100% fair to say like oh you guys don't play this, but like it really does feel like that they aren't playtesting this at all because some of these changes and what they've said in Blue Post is just factually wrong about.
Oh yeah, there's
Yeah.
ton of like just straight up inaccuracies, and like granted, I don't think the posts are written by class devs, but they probably provided like some sort of like okay, here's what you write, or like some like
Yeah,
some
specific,
bullet points of like okay, these are the things we changed,
but
but like yeah, it's pretty atrocious. Um, fuck, I was gonna
Yeah.
try and go back to the Colossus Street, but
No, go for it.
uh oh, the DR shit. We were talking about the DR shit. Um, I think a big reason why they put like all this DR in it, right, is primarily for Prot, honestly. Like, yes, arms to an extent, but also Prot's gonna be pretty vulnerable while channeling this. and having like basically demolish function is like a mini defensive, right? Like because you get 10% less damage during it, you have 5% less damage overall, and then you get 10% less damage after it too. Like that's
Being able to
basically just a
block
mini
too.
CD.
Being able to block too is nice.
Oh
It's
yeah,
almost
that's sick.
it's it's almost gonna feel kind of like what the hell's the name of it? I think it's Neltharion's Fury,
Yeah. The
the
shield.
legendary or the Legion artifact ability.
Yeah,
Except there's no crit block tied to it, but that's basically what it is. It's a channel.
yeah.
So
There's
they've done
well,
it. They've done it before on Prot, and it worked. So it'll
well,
be
talking
fine.
about like critical block in the Mountain Thane tree. Obviously, the first node on the left is crit damage and crit block. One of the things that does worry me. Wait, actually, no. The crit damage is in the Colossus tree. Actually,
Yes.
wait, no.
Yeah.
Actually, no. That talent's
It's
just
on
in
the
the
same
Colossus
node.
tree. It's the same one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's on the same
So
node.
they do have crit block. But
Yeah, a little bit.
moving over, I guess we'll go Slayer and then Mountain Thane, and then we'll talk about the class trees themselves.
Okay.
But
And
moving
One
because
thing I do want to say is that like I don't have a massive issue with like any of these hero talents. For the most part, these are like really good. Most of my issues lie with like the core specs and like how they're functioning.
yeah,
pretty
because
much.
Also,
we don't
I don't mean to shit on your knockdown thing, but that talent sucks. That
that
knockdown thing is bad.
I
but the
I
knockup
was
one,
gonna
the knockup
say.
one owns.
I was
It
gonna say, like, personally,
man,
man, I don't know where that's coming from. I think the Earthquaker is terrible, and they should get rid of it or try again with something else. Like,
the
I
issue is that like it does the knockup while they're stunned. That's like
well,
Well, the
what he's saying is what makes it good is if everything's immune, you can
yeah.
still knock them up. Which it's
it
like to me, it's like if you need another CC, if they're that, it like the pack should just be dead.
well,
But
it's also that's also kind of a compositional issue thing too, where it's like, well, what did I play with? DHs, monks, ret paladins. All right, Wake of Ashes stun into leg sweep into Chaos Nova. So some of that compositional issue in terms of stuns is also like a problem on my end because obviously I'm in the group, right? But I do like the fact that you're not gonna it will
I do.
always work is why I like it more than anything
I
else.
mean,
That's fair.
I mean, credit to where you're pointing out that it does have use. Where I really didn't even think about that personally, so like that makes me hate it less. But I just think a 4 second AOE stun is just gonna blow that away every time, personally. But
Yeah,
Yeah, because
I'm pretty sure that's the highest AoE CC, if not tied for
like
the AoE highest
like
AoE
this is
CC in
what
the game by like a lot.
basically with that talent, that's just what Shockwave was, which was a 4 second AOE stun. They nerfed it to 3 seconds in Legion, then they nerfed it again to 2 seconds, and we've had it at 2 seconds ever since. And this talent just basically gives that back. And given the strength of that 4 second AOE stun, like that's a lot of time.
yeah, it might just
So
end up being better, especially with
I so
the
yeah,
CDR in the base tree.
yeah.
But
You basically have it every
I
pack.
do like the option.
No, I
Like
like I said, I give credit to like actually thinking of that because I didn't even think about that.
But
it's
So
moving, sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
kudos.
Well, it's like leg sweeps. Leg sweep is 6 yards, 3 seconds. Fell Nova is like I think it's the same, and then Shockwave is just like 9 yards. Fucking oh no, it's
Oh,
actually more than that. It's 16 yard cone, 4 second stun on a 25 second cooldown if you hit more than 3 targets.
Which is going to be
That
crazy
is
in
that's a
PvP.
fucking crazy cracked stun for like all forms of content. That is disgusting.
with
Yeah,
how accessible it is
Yeah,
in a
that's
positive light,
insane. Even in
especially in
like
raids.
even in raid, like
Yeah,
look at
raids.
Firak. If you had that on Firak, Warrior would be fucking like a
I
menace,
mean,
at least for P2.
Warriors already really good on Farak without having any CC. Well, I mean, I'm sure some people have played it for Prog, but like, well, first of all, I feel bad for you because that sucks. But you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
having that
yeah,
would just be awesome, and that really plays into like kind of our damage profile too. Is usually we are using cooldowns in scenarios like that, so being able to do CC and the
Yeah.
damage where that matters is a
I
very
just
powerful combo.
I just can't understate how fucking busted a 16 yard 4 second 25 second cooldown stun is. Like that is disgusting.
yeah.
The next closest thing is like leg sweep or chaos nova, and those are like 45 second CDs, I think.
Yeah.
But
But
yeah,
moving over to Slayer, I Slayer is very obviously currently it's very riddled with bugs on the PTR, so like you can't like fully test everything and how it works. So there's got to be a grain of salt there. But Slayer feels very odd to me as it was touted as the execute centric um of the hero talents, which it is, but I also think when I consider it, it's like, well, if it's the execute centric talent, if it actually buffed execute itself that much, it would be even a bigger problem for arms than it currently is, where so much of arms' damage is built in the last 35% of the fight, that the rest of the fight its damage suffers. If there's a execute centric phase, obviously that's crazy good, right? But if there isn't that, then arms has certainly suffered for the duration of the expansion with having all of its damage so backloaded. Um,
Yeah,
but for sorry, good.
finish what you're gonna say. I'll say my bit
Yeah.
after.
But the Slayer, but one of the things that I think is difficult in the Slayer tree is first of all, there's no choice between Ravager and Bladestorm. But regardless of there being no choice, forcing sudden death and forcing you normally pass sudden death anyway, but the required enforcement of sudden death and Bladestorm, which are in two different parts of the tree, Bladestorm being in that lower 20 point part of the tree, which is the most restrictive out of all of them, seems problematic to a degree, and that's some of that is an issue in pathing in arms itself, but forced talent points while having to lose other things does feel kind of awkward because like if you take it, you're basically you're losing like fatality and bloodletting to a degree just by needing to take those two talent points because you're not going to take Ravager or Bladestorm, which in Slayer's case it has to be Bladestorm without Hurricane because Hurricane's just crazy, right?
I I actually I'm not okay. Maybe this is like some fucking Feely Craft copium shit, but I'm not even sure you take Hurricane as arms with Slayer. I think Unhinged is kind of just better. Like, and most of this hinges off of if Unhinged procs off of the Frenetic Flurry Bladestorm. If it does, I think you're just playing Unhinged.
Well, the currently on the PTR because most of the information
Yeah,
I'm
I know
getting from
everything's
this is
bugged as shit,
watching.
right?
Yeah, is
So
Slayer
it's
just
impossible
watch,
to tell.
watching Dan War's video when he procced that Bladestorm. It didn't give him a Hurricane stack. But
Yeah,
that
so
could be a
it's kind
bug,
of hard to
obviously.
tell.
So it's hard to tell.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I don't know that this is true, but okay, yeah, it's so uncertain. It's like really hard to give an opinion on. I think if Frenetic Flurry for whatever reason procs a full duration Hurricane, then you're playing Hurricane all the time, and like I don't particularly like Hurricane very
nah,
much.
we
I'd prefer
slop here.
Bladestorm just do damage. Um, And secondly, if Frenetic Flurry also procs Unhinged at the same time that it doesn't proc like a full ramping Hurricane, then you're just going to play Unhinged because that's full. That's two free casts of Bladestorm for less than a GCD of commitment, right? Like it's just a proc that occupies one GCD.
Yeah,
That would be kind of crazy. That would be kind of cracked.
and
Um,
with anger management feeding into the Bladestorm, one thing I'm not sure of is if it's an issue or not. But like the Mountain Thane talent that reduces the cooldown of Ravager, you really start unsyncing your cooldowns a
yeah,
lot
it'll
with
get
these new
desynced really
talents.
fast.
That's kind of how both specs are if you're included. If you're gonna play
Yeah,
that, is there's just like so much desync going on from different sources of CDR that don't interact with each other,
yeah.
Yeah, which I mean,
which is
in and of itself
Also,
isn't a problem. It just certainly from how we've played the Warrior for a
I
while, desyncing your cooldowns just feels awkward.
I
it does.
personally think that is a huge problem because I don't want to be old unholy DK. That's just not fun.
What
Personally,
how is Old Unholy DK like? Because I'm not too
like
familiar.
your cooldowns are just always out of sync. Like outside of the first go, your shit just never lines up again until like maybe 3 or 4 minutes into the fight or something. It's just really cringe.
So
It just I
you're
don't know.
just hitting your cooldowns just when they're
Yeah,
up, just because you're
you
Yeah,
always
just
getting
slam them. You
CDR.
just
because
you just rip them.
you're just losing uses if you hold. So it's like, and unless like the cooldown is so wildly tuned around syncing with everything else, which is so rare. Like the only example I can really think of that is like I think Warlocks did something like that with Dark Soul at some point, and then Fury and Antorus you didn't ever use Bloodbath without Battle Cry ever. So
Similarly, you'd also just hold Avatar forever for Battle Cry.
pretty much that too. Like
Basically, any CD that wasn't Battle Cry, you held for Battle Cry.
Which, in terms of like desync and cooldowns, do you think there's? I know people like the playstyle, but do you think there's a potential of just straight up removing anger management as a talent
I don't think
because
you remove
of?
it.
I think it's too popular to.
Yeah, I think you'd upset a lot
I
of
have
people.
I have mixed feelings about it. Like sometimes I like it, and other times it's like frustrating because I don't know. I'd say overall for just how Warrior has been for the least that long time that I've played it, like 10 years almost, like almost every time in the meta, there's always some kind of cooldown reduction revolving around Warrior to where it has damage all the time, like in any expansion, regardless if it's AM or a trinket or like it just has always played with some form of CDR that, you know,
Yeah,
makes it
and
good.
the new hero
So
talents obviously play into that because people obviously like it, right? Because the new hero talents always play
Yeah,
into
no,
it. There's more CDR.
definitely.
they
One thing
just
I
need
could see
to.
happening is like people just not playing AM with Slayer. Like I know, I don't know. I've seen a lot of people be like, "Oh my god, you get fucking 30-second CD Blade Storm," but I don't. Do you even want that?
Well,
Like,
one of the things Dan
is your
said
time
was
isn't your
like
time better spent pressing other
It's
buttons?
you're literally
it's
just going to
really
be spinning so much. Well, I think one of the problems too is even if spinning all the time wasn't that big of a deal, um, Blade Storm just doesn't do great single targets. So
Well, yeah,
it
that's
just
that's
feels
kind of my
bad to
point,
use.
right? Like, do you really want a 30-second Blade Storm, or do you want? Well, let's say they tune Spiteful Serenity to a point where it's actually useful instead of being this garbage talent. Um, wouldn't maybe you just prefer having Spiteful Serenity and Colossus Smash being like 26-second duration, and then you just
In less windows, you get
you're
like two big Blade Storms or something.
yeah, maybe you get two big blade storms, or maybe you don't even care so much that your cooldowns are getting desynced, because as long as blade storm comes back up during that 26-second long duration Colossus Smash, it just doesn't matter, right? So like you're only really playing around one form of CDR, and if you need to, like you can just send it anyways. It doesn't matter. Um, my point being, like, yeah, it's kind of cringe with AM because the idea of AM is like reducing the cooldown of everything simultaneously. But maybe you just don't care. You go for the longer duration cooldowns and just play around that window instead, right? Like, let's say there's a situation where you have Colossus Smash up, but no Blade Storm. Um, oh no, I just wait 10 seconds for my Blade Storm to come back up, and then I press it, and it's still in the Colossus Smash window anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Whereas like with AM, it could technically work out the same, but like you're not as it's just not as consistent, right? Because the CDR is heavily based on uptime. So if there's a weird fight like Farak where you get a lot of downtime because of intermissions, um, you just get fucked and you have to deal with it.
yeah, because I think well, one of the things as well with these Slayer talents specifically is they don't seem to work too well together. Because you have Imminent Demise that's giving you additional Blade Storm hits, which is fine because it's consuming the Marked for Execution stacks. But Imminent Demise isn't even buffing your sudden death like
Yeah.
Season 1
Oh
Fury Set
yeah.
does.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
one of the problems I have with Slayer is numerically it's probably going to be fine. Like I numerically for any of this stuff, I'm honestly not too worried about it because Blizzard's done a very very good job in terms of like overall tuning, at least in
It
raid,
will,
right?
Mountain Thane sucks. That
Yeah,
it just doesn't really do damage, but it's cool conceptually.
but the fact that you're always sitting on top of these stacks, like you might be sitting on Imminent Demise stacks, the and I'm talking about you're sitting at the max stacks of 3 and you just can't use them, or you're at the max
Yeah,
stacks of
because
3
you're
and you can't consume it
for
with an
whatever
execute
reason,
proc
frenetic
because it's
flurry
not,
just doesn't proc it. Like, it just doesn't trigger the stacks, which is like super dumb.
which could just
It's
be
Because
another
what's the
bug thing,
point?
which is one of the worst,
It
which
could
is what
be. It
it's
could
very
be.
because that's the
that's
one
why
thing
it's
that's
hard to
just
talk
difficult.
about.
Sorry, good.
that's why this is hard to talk about because it doesn't
Yeah.
fucking work. Like until they fix it and it
Slayer's just
actually works,
completely
it's like
broken.
It does
it's
work. Tunnel vision, my favorite talent.
Woo! Tunnel vision
works.
poggers.
Once again, I don't know why they've done this, but
No
they've
one likes it.
released
Get rid of it.
another talent that in some situations is going to be numerically better, so you'll take it. But much like Frenzy in the Fury tree, which Fury can be Slayer, you're going to come into situations where if you have to swap, but this talent is numerically better, and so you're going to have it, that
It
just
just
means
feels like
that
shit.
you're going to lose 8% haste and 20% attack speed, which directly contributes to the flow and feel of combat as you're playing, not even considering whether or not you're running improved enraged or powerful enraged, which we'll get into. But losing almost what I would akin to like 30% attack speed just out of nowhere for doing your job just feels bad. Like, I don't know why they have kept
I have no idea.
I
literally
mean
tunnel vision
this
style of
talent
talents in.
this talent literally existed in the form of a trinket from Archimond for Fury, and it resets whenever yes, you can play around it with macros, but is that really fun? And at the end of the day, this shit's a fucking game. Like, we play it to
Yeah.
have fun. Like, that's not fun gameplay. And like, even the high end people, like, I'm not gonna fucking do that shit. I'm not gonna play with macros. Like, that's. I mean,
Yeah,
you can just say that's like you could just like, okay, he's chalking it up to a loss, and like, yeah, I'll chalk it up to a loss because that's ridiculous to ask that.
having
Like,
to
Yeah.
mouse over macro every single
Yeah,
having to mouse
I'm
over
not fucking
macro
doing that shit.
rampage just because
it's
just
this
having to mouse over
this
macro just
talent
so you don't lose fury is just terrible.
this talent in particular really shows to me and feels like they don't listen to us because we've complained about frenzy
Frenzy
for
forever since it
we
was put in the
we
game.
it was changed in whatever Shadowlands. We played with it all of Shadowlands. Hey, we don't like this. Okay, we're keeping it in Dragonflight. Okay, now we're to the point again. Hey, we don't like this. Here's something else that does the same thing. It's like
Man.
it to me.
Yeah.
It just like
So
I'm not
if
trying to be disrespectful, but it feels like you guys don't listen, or I
because
don't know.
if they changed it to basically an upkeep buff that falls off on intermissions, I don't think anyone would have a problem with it. But when you're like doing a
Even
boss,
that's like
well,
pretty. I wouldn't feel too good about it, but it would feel better than what it
Yeah,
is
well,
now.
like doing
I
a
still
I
boss
wouldn't
like
don't.
want it though.
Doing a boss like Laradar, if you have to swap to the
Yeah, to
trees,
the
if you're
roots. Yeah.
not rampaging before the boss runs away, because the fight's designed, the boss is going to be away from you. So if you're not
Yeah.
pre-rampaging the boss and then sending cooldown or sending your stuff into the roots and then not swapping back to the boss with like a whirlwind stack before it gets back to you, you just lose 8% haste. And it's the same thing on Fire Act, where it's like, hey guys, we gotta kill the red guy. At a certain point with our damage, I stopped hitting the red guy and just started sitting on the purple guy. I don't do that now, because when you do sales, that shit doesn't matter, right? But in terms of our prog, is like, well, the purple guy needs to die and the red guy needs to die. But if I'm hitting the red guy,
Yeah. It just
then
it
I
makes you feel
also
like shit
reduce
for
my
doing the right
damage
thing.
on the purple
It also
guy, which also needs to die. It's just a very
it's
awkward situation. I think even
Yeah.
it's not a
Rogues had to deal
it's
with
not
that shit too.
it's just not good design, and it enforces and it promotes bad play. Like,
Yeah. It literally
because
promotes you to be a bad raider by not
it's
target swapping. And like, okay, for what it's worth, I think tunnel vision's the only redeeming thing about tunnel vision is that on any fight with an ad, thrill of the kill is probably just going to be better anyways because you can proc it more often.
And it's and it. I think do we know the proc rate of imminent demise currently? Is it like 3 a minute or
It's
something?
well, I mean,
it's
if
2.12 hasted.
that's the other thing too is with the increased sudden death proc rate. Granted, this shit's bugged, so maybe that's not even working properly. But assuming that is working properly, that's still not enough. Like, it
No.
needs to be. Unironically, I think it needs to be somewhere around the Vault of the Incarnates tier set to like really make it
I think
good.
Vault was
With
like 4 a minute, which would
you,
bring us
It
to
was
either
4, but it was hasted, so it was 7.
yeah, you
Um,
would get like basically if we had that many, you would just have
you
the
just
thrill to
keep that
kill up all
30% the
the
whole
time.
time.
yeah, it would be,
Without
and
even, I
that's
mean, you're gonna have it no matter what in execute. So it's like
yeah. That's like kind of an interesting thing too is that like on any fight with an important like sub 40%, sub 35% burn, Thrill of the Kill is just going to be better because it's more damage and execute than Tunnel Vision is.
Which does lead into the Slayer being execute focused too, right? Like in
Yeah.
in terms of thematics, I
Well,
think
it's also like
Bladestorm.
you have more uptime on like Overwhelmed on the boss. It like feeds into more Slayer's dominance and all this other shit. So like, yes, it is kind of sort of execute themed, but I think they made a mistake when they advertised it as an execute spec, when really it's a Bladestorm spec with like a little bit of execute uh synergy thrown in there.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Overwhelmed, I think one of the best things they did to the tree itself with its changes is that they made Overwhelming Blades, which is just a stacking 1% buff that stacks up to 10 in last 20 seconds. Because one of my concerns is sometimes classes, especially like our current version of Fury, can almost feel somewhat lottery because it's like, oh, do I just get more rampages because I got more unbridled ferocity procs? So I just have more recklessness, and you can slot essentially. You have to slot machine your way into a certain amount of extra damage, which doesn't feel good. And one thing that making that overwhelming blades talent capped but increased duration way removes the idea I had in my initial thoughts video, where I was like, are we, because it's possible that depending on how that thing worked and how many procs you got, you
could
wouldn't
just have
even
100% uptime or not.
well, well, it's not even that. If it's stacked infinitely, you wouldn't even play the spec the way it's designed to be played. You would play the spec on just continually making sure you don't lose stacks. Because I wondered if it would be like Iron Fur, where each individual stack would fall off on its own, or if it would be a permanent buff that you would stack up. Because if it was a permanent buff that you could stack up, imagine you're towards the end of the fight and you've played meticulously around using your sudden deaths, using your blade storms, all of this on just keeping that stat count, you could wind up with over, this is a ridiculous example, but over 130% additional damage that you're doing. And you're not like playing the class in the game. You're playing overwhelming blades at that point. And them changing that to be stack limited, as well as increasing the duration so you're not like really thinking about it too much, feels way better, or seems way better to me, because that's that kind of degenerate gameplay that led them to remove Ignore Pain off of
And
anger
Juggernaut.
management. Yeah,
Original Juggernaut. Yeah, no, I agree. It was nice of them to like first of all increase the duration because that wasn't there before, and clarify a max number of stacks. Because that wasn't there either. I think it was like 10 seconds before, and there was no
10.
indication of a max, like an upper limit on the stacks. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, them changing that was super nice. I'm happy that happened.
But
my only concern is that, like, Blizzard said, like, oh yeah, we're aiming for hero specs to be like about a 20% damage increase. And like, in a roundabout way, this kind of makes up like 10% of that damage, which is like a little bit worrisome to me, because it means there's not very much power left for the rest of the tree. But I mean, that 20% is kind of hand wavy anyways, and so is the 10% for that matter.
Well, one thing I think is an interesting point, not from me, but from in terms of balancing from Max, was the fact that each node has its own tuning. So they just have knobs to turn, right? Like you look at the node or I think it's Colossus, that's just Mortal Strike and Shield Slam with 20% more damage. It was 15, they buffed it to 20, but they can just like, oh, is Warrior doing like 3% more damage than it's supposed to? What if how much of that damage is Mortal Strike? We just tune that down, right? Like it gives them the option.
Is Colossus underperforming relative to Slayer? If yes, we just tune up the damage on one of the things from Colossus, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be the ability. It can be stuff like Mortal Strike, or if you're or like Raging Blow or Bloodthirst, that kind of thing. Which I think is good. But moving away from Slayer, since obviously it's difficult to talk about. Oh, good.
I do have one more thing to say. The thing with Slayer and with Mountain Thane specifically is that a lot of their operations, and I don't think this is a problem for ARMS, to be fair. I think this is exclusively for Fury because Overpower feels like a good button for ARMS. And I think most of their stuff procs off of that. But for Fury, they have Bloodthirst synergy. And Bloodthirst is just a bad button, because it enrages and it gives enrage and it does damage. The damage is shit. The rage is less than Raging Blow, and enrage is taken care of solely by um, Rampage or Onslaught. So uh, we basically don't care about that button, and they put a lot of Bloodthirst energy into the trees, which I don't think is a bad thing. But you just have to make Bloodthirst better at a baseline,
What about
and
so good?
there's just there's no way around it. You just have to make it better.
Yeah,
Like, yes, you can argue like, oh yeah, well, the Bloodthirst improvement is the fact that it's in the trees, but it's like, I didn't want to press this button before, and now you're making me press it through these trees. That's still not going to feel good because I have this negative conception about Bloodthirst in my mind. Not only that, but you've removed like a shit ton of Bloodthirst synergy from the Fury tree, so it's like, okay, like what exactly are we doing here? Maybe just make the button good, and then we'll want to press it anyways.
Yeah, because one of my initial ideas, especially looking at the amount of like in the Mountain Thane tree, there's the one that gives your next bloodthirst have two bloodthirsts have no cooldown. One of the thoughts I had is what if they actually just buffed the button itself? So like what if it was actually a 10-second cooldown, right? What if it was a big cooldown? Because there's these talents in there that are like 10% overpower and bloodthirst cooldown reduction. But those just don't matter. Like you're not
Yeah,
like maybe
it's
for
not reducing the
overpower a
CD
little
by
bit,
enough.
but like those just don't matter. So making bloodthirst an actual button would be good. I wonder if they removed the might be controversial, but what if they just removed the heal from Bloodthirst and just added, because it's called Bloodthirst, what if they just made it by base do a little bleed, and then if you wanted Cold Steel Hot Blood, it can do an extra bleed and the healing from it on top of that, but by actually giving the button itself just more power. Because I feel one of the things, something I've noticed in World of Warcraft is outside of outliers like sanctified plates, normally when there's a lot that's happening from pushing a single button, like Bloodthirst, where you're doing damage and you're healing from it, the buttons are normally just worse because they're hybrid, right? They're just not generally doing what they want to do or what you would want it to do more specifically. Do you think them potentially removing the heal aspect of Bloodthirst itself and just making it a better damage button would make it more viable for these trees? Because Mountain Thane seems very focused on Raging Blow. Actually, no, I'll just stop with there and I'll go into the other stuff after. But what do you just feel about like how would you help Bloodthirst be a real button?
The
Either through like Crushing Force, maybe buffing it or something in the main tree, or like what?
the
There's
problem.
Go ahead.
I'll
You
go,
go
yeah,
first. I'll go
I'll
after.
go. The problem since forever, Bloodthirst is like it. This button has just like never done damage ever. Like it's always been more of a support button because it's doing something. And at the current state of Warrior, with it just doesn't fulfill that role anymore very well, except for like very rare occurrences where pretty much historically when they gave Enrage, I think it was Cataclysm when they started doing this, if I remember right. If not, it was Mop for sure. I know Mop for sure, but maybe Cata. But you were using it to get enraged, and now we have two different other sources to get enraged. So that purpose is pretty much just been shifted away from this button. So now we have this button that doesn't do what it is supposed to do anymore. Well, it does, but those needs are covered elsewhere. So they either need to like they should just that's what they could do is since you can get enraged from two other buttons. I don't know if pulling it off needs to be done, but they just really need to increase the damage or make it generate more rage than Raging Blow because currently it does piss damage and it always has done piss damage. And that's the other part is it only hits with your main hand. So I think other people have said it. I think Xan said it.
It
Like
was my idea.
give it an offhand component. Like that would help tune it to be
Yep.
better. If given current tuning right now, if it just had an offhand component, that I'm not a huge math guy, but like I'm not gonna say that's enough, but
It's pretty
that's
close.
that's an easier step in the right direction than trying to tune it. I
And
feel
they
like,
and they
It's
or
could
like
easily
really
make. Sorry, good.
it's really like just giving Bloodthirst an offhand swing that like does equivalent damage as the because right now it's 80% AP. If you just make the offhand do 80%, um, at a baseline before any talents, it's just better than Raging Blow. After talents, Raging Blow is still better, but there's like other things you can do as well. Like
because if you're gonna allow the offhand to interact with all the talents, like
yeah, that
give it
too.
like giving Enrage, for example, because it would
Giving
count as
Enrage and
it would be
double
two.
chance for Cold Steel Hot Blood too.
Yeah, it would be 2 chances to crit, which would give you more KS or CSHB uptime, or giving 2 chances of enraging off the button.
Well,
And
So
yeah, the other thing you can do is just slap Bloodthirst on Crushing Force. I think just before you go, Maddox,
Mhm.
like you just have to make Bloodthirst do more damage than Raging Blow, so it's a higher priority button, right? Like you make it do more damage, you hit it on cooldown, and in between that, like during that
one
cooldown, you hit Raging Blow.
Well,
one way or
even
another, like that's just what's got to happen. The only time it really did do that was
BFA, right?
probably this tier with the stupid Annihilator build with that shit. Yeah. And then probably just triple Cold Steel and BFA, because with triple of those traits did so much damage, and you got so much extra rage out of it when you procced it. Because that's where that key is in that build, or that synergy is. That bleed does so much damage, and it's giving more rage than a Raging Blow does, or equal rage. I can't remember. I think it was still
It's
8, and then it gave 4 from the trait, so
yeah,
it was
it's equal
equal.
rage.
It would give equal rage and do more damage. So you obviously wanted to use it on cooldown to keep the uptime up on the bleed as well. But like that was just one way they accomplished it. We don't have that anymore because, I mean, yeah, Cold Steel Hot Blood still exists, but it is nowhere near what it was in BFA, and it shouldn't be there because that was like ridiculous, and that's just how it was
Also,
tuned. That's how it was tuned in that expansion, because we didn't have all these other tools that we have now.
it's also just not as good as like Cruelty and Wrath and Fury, which are each like those two talents combined are a 30% DPS increase to Raging
yeah.
Blow.
Well, that's what I was
Like,
gonna mention, where it's like Bloodthirst has no actual, like, outside of the one node where it gets 10%.
yeah,
It doesn't get additional charges. It doesn't get bonus damage. It can't reset its own cooldown. A lot of the efficiency of Raging Blow and why it was used so much. I mean, it was used really early on with the Crushing Blow build in like early 10.0 because of Reckless Abandon's 2 stacks. I mean, it to the
it
detriment
was
of it,
big.
because you would literally ignore your rage bar, kind of like you did previously with arms and how they fixed it, or how they adjusted it. But you had just ignored your rage bar and you just hit Rampage, Crushing Blow, because it just that's the most damage you could do with it. But Bloodthirst having utility compared to actual damage in a tree is somewhat odd. Because obviously you have Cold Steel Hot Blood, right? You have the one thing that gives it 10%. You then have the Enrage percent with Deft Experience, which isn't very valid. You have Blood Craze, which just increases the percent chance to crit, which, if Bloodthirst hit with both weapons and that stacked twice potentially, would be a way more interesting talent,
I
or a
actually
better
think you
talent.
just nuke that talent.
Yeah.
So like, okay, first of all, fresh meat sucks. Bad talent shouldn't be in the tree. It's just bad.
I mean, what fresh
It's
meat
never
does should
useful.
just be like that should just be built in my
It
opinion,
The
should
because
be
first
it,
Bloodthirst on
100%.
target just
it,
gives you
it
crit,
yeah,
Yeah,
or
like
just give you the enrage.
they can kick out the extra enrage
15%.
chance or
Yeah,
whatever.
that's fine.
So you can still stay at that, but they just should give, like, anytime you hit a bloodthirst
It just yeah.
on a new target, it gives you enrage, or like once per combat, your first, like, so that way when you go into new packs and you don't have enough rage to rampage, or you don't have cooldowns to get your rage back up to get your your mastery going, like it just feels horrible.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think so. My idea for a replacement for this talent, because I don't think it's good and it probably should just be baseline. Um, just put a talent there that says like, oh yeah, Bloodthirst's chance to chance to crit is doubled, right? So like whatever your crit rating is, double that. That's Bloodthirst's chance to crit. Then you have like a
Yeah.
much. It's just like this is. It also amps the damage of Bloodthirst because obviously crit is damage.
Mhm.
Because it just does more damage. And it also gives you more consistent Cold Steel Hot Blood procking. Maybe that's a bit overkill with the offhand swing, but honestly, I don't really care. Warrior has not had anything that's like overkill broken in so fucking long, and like I don't even think that that's that broken. It's
We
just like,
just got a
okay, now
legendary weapon and it's
like
bad.
Bloodthirst is just good. Bloodthirst is just good now instead of being bad, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the overkill change. That Bloodthirst is a good button now.
Like,
Um
yeah. Like, we just got the legendary
Also
weapon and it's bad. It's so funny, dude.
true, the legendary weapon is bad. Yeah. Yeah, just give Bloodthirst an offhand swing and slap Bloodthirst on Crushing Force, and we're cool. And
Yeah, because I think
and also,
if you
I
just
do
gave
think that
Crushing Force some
increasing,
crit would be good.
yeah, I do think increasing Bloodthirst cooldown is fine too, because like as it stands right now, like okay, yeah, no, the lightning strikes make your Bloodthirst have no cooldown, but like, does that really matter on a 4.5 second CD button that's hasted? Just like make it 6 seconds or some shit, and then it's like, okay, now this actually feels good to have proc. You get less bloodthirst overall, maybe, but it makes the procs from like burst of power and what's the other one? Uh, Slayer's reflexes feel better. It also gives more like value to constant pressure, which I think that talent just sucks. They probably need to do something about that. That's in the Slayer tree, by the way.
Well,
10% CD on bloodthirst and overpower is just
yeah,
dog shit.
it's just nothing, right? You're gonna hit it
It's
every other
not. You're
global
just
anyway. What is it?
always pressing Slayer's reflex like that. Slayer's reflexes is like so much better than constant pressure. It's not even funny.
Yeah, one of the things I think is, speaking in terms of like between Raging Blow and Bloodthirst as well. How would you feel if Mountain Thane? Because one of the things I find odd is they wanted to have both specs press both buttons. They want that. Because there's obviously things that buff Raging Blow and things that buff Bloodthirst in both trees. Do you think it would be more thematic to maybe not thematic? I mean, it would feel weird, right? Like imagine I say Mountain Thane as an example, where a lot of stuff basically just works off of Raging Blow, and you even get percent bonus damage increases to Raging Blow in the tree on top of stuff like Cruelty and Wrath and Fury. But then it's like, hey, if you want these Thunder Blasts, you gotta press Bloodthirst, and that's like the only thing it does in the tree.
I
Do
kind
you
of
think?
like that, if
Well,
I'm being honest.
do you want that, or would you rather it just be everything flowed into Raging Blow for that, and then everything flowed into Bloodthirst for Fury? Do you like having two buttons to press for those?
Personally, I do. I'll let Gajeel talk for a little bit because I've been
Like
yapping for like
they
5 minutes.
they just need to restructure the rotation around Bloodthirst again, and that by making it good. Like whether it's buffing the shit out of the damage or making it do something else to where it's just like you want to use it on cooldown no matter what, unless you're rage capped. Like
Because Bloodthirst has been in the game since literally vanilla.
it's a vanilla
Literally
ability,
vanilla. It is the
and
ability that has lasted over everything else in the warrior trees. Like I am very I have been very even since when I played in Shadowlands, I was very surprised at essentially how poorly this button has been treated given the legacy it has
I mean
and how
the
it
game's been almost like this game has been almost 20 years, and this button has been piss for that entire time. Like
yeah, it was good in vanilla, but obviously most things in vanilla were auto attack till you can hit your button. So not like
pretty much,
crazy either.
and
Because I
even then,
mean, a
your
lot
auto
of it was
attack's
mortal.
just
A lot of it was heroic strike, just because you can guarantee hits with that. But um, moving to because we've talked about Colossus, we talked about Slayer, but moving to Mountain Thane, um, I like the idea of it. Obviously, you have the Warcraft 3, the Mountain King, right, the dwarf with his, and even thematically, right, since the beginning, Blood and Thunder has been a warrior thing, and this fits it perfectly. Uh, one thing I had a misconception on is I would thought you would have like literally Whirlwind and Thunderblast or Thunderclap on your bar, and then you'd press the proc when you get it. But no, it's just a straight 1-to-1 replacement. Because all of the talents that influence uh Thunder or Whirlwind influence Thunderclap, so you just straight up replace it on your bar. Um, but thematically, I think it's awesome. I think
It's super
everyone I've
cool.
talked to
to
thinks it's really
kind of
cool.
fuel into what you were saying about how it's basically a one-to-one replacement. To me, that's a good thing because for Fury it works really well because like there's no way with how they've designed it, it's having two AoE abilities is just not going to work. Like, and then you go to arms and we have four abilities that are doing the same thing. Like I just arms has a button bullet problem, and Mountain Thane does not do anything to address that. I mean, oh, I guess you can't even play arms Mountain Thane, but yeah, just like I think that's a good thing that it replaces the Whirlwind because yeah, it kind of sucks if you like that ability versus the other one, but like how the fuck is Fury gonna work with like you'd have to completely rework
Yeah.
the rotation and
Well,
like it
uh, one of the things that kind of concerns me, well, Mountain Thane seems really cool. A problem that Fury has had uh, is obviously our single target translates to our AoE, right? That's just kind of how it's been because of how Meat Cleaver, Morrowind stacks, and all that kind of stuff. And Mountain Thane plays into this even more, where you're even on potentially single target specking into Meat Cleaver, which requires 2 point talent investment to get a 25% bonus damage increase to Thunderclap. But even on single target, you're going to do the same damage whether it's one target or five. And
Yeah,
I think that comes
Mountain
into a
Thane's gonna be
problem.
it's
This
gonna be
this
completely unplayable on pretty much any raid fight
So
because there's never a time where you care more about doing AoE than single target.
because I think they need to add some form of maybe not even just Mount Thing, maybe not even just Thunderclap, but for a lot of AoE centric abilities for Warrior, except for I'd say maybe not like Arms Thunderclap or because they want you to press Rend on single target, because even if you have Blood and Thunder, it'd still apply it. So you still want to be able to press Rend. But for Fury, having a steroid for single target for hitting a one person when you're using an AoE button, I think would go a long way to being able to balance the class as a whole within an AoE situation while also allowing it to
the
do single target because
It would help a metric fuck
the
ton.
it is a massive problem that you're not allowed
the
to essentially do both.
the problem with Fury specifically on why it's meat cleaver is the problem. And before this gets confusing on what side of the fence I'm on, I'm not saying to get rid of meat cleaver. In BFA, that's when they allowed you to cleave all of the buttons. Meat cleaver historically has only affected like one or two buttons. Like in WAD and Miss Pandaria, it was just Raging Blow, period. And Rampage did not exist in these expansions. You could only cleave Raging Blows. You could not cleave executes. You could not cleave any of this other stuff, which allowed the single target tuning to be more precise on where they're giving it because it's only affected by X factors. Now that Fury can cleave all of its buttons, this is where the tuning problem comes in because if you buff the shit out of the single target, you're giving a lot of AoE too. And I know a lot of people like being able to cleave execute, but I hate it because it puts the spec into this corner of just like
It
of what
waters
this is
down
good.
your single
This is
target a
this
lot.
is this is what it feels good. The rotation is fun and it feels good. It works, but it puts us in this corner on tuning that it's just impossible to balance because of this. And Fury's always had this 5 target cap that's like it's been like this since forever. It's been like 4 or 5 targets with meat cleaver, so that's another thing that's normal, but that's just I don't know. In Legion, you could only cleave Rampage, and I think it was Bloodthirst and Rampage,
Yeah.
which worked with it. Like you couldn't cleave any Raging Blows or Executes, which allowed Execute to actually be a real button and do what it was intended to do. And the
Did it still
you had
cost
decent.
rage back then, or did it build
Yes,
rage?
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
in BFA is when they turned it into they turned it into a generator by and allowing it to be cleaved. That's why Execute has felt so neutered for so long, especially on Fury because of allowing it to be cleaved and the generator part. And these two things, like at the end of the day, a lot of what that comes down to is personal preference. Like a lot of people like that. I get it, and that's why it's stayed in the game for 6 years because people like it. But people don't look at it the way that I don't know. I feel like they don't look at it the way I do, where it's because it's being allowed to do this. It's you're losing you're losing what it's supposed to be, I
Yeah,
guess, which is
there's
your
give and
single
take with
target.
everything, right?
It's a
So
huge give and take, and it's personal preference. Like I get that, but that's kind of where Fury has this problem of if it's really good at single target, that means it's good at this, and then it's one of the hard. It's always like historically, Fury's one of the hardest specs to balance in the game because of the way it works. It's just I get it, it's hard, but some of these things happen because of the design choices.
yeah. Um, one of the concerns I have with Mountain Thane as well is while I think thematically it's definitely probably the best of the bunch, there's a lot of percent of a percent of a percent in there, right? Like you have
Yeah.
lightning
Yeah, it's
A
way
strike
lot
too
of
you have
RNG.
lightning strike percents, you have that percent giving you Avatar, which Avatar gives you burst. So like a single
It's a
lightning
lot of
strike could chain into 4 seconds of Avatar, which could be two. Which when you gain Avatar grants you 2 Thunder Blasts, and ends up just giving you the end goal of three talent. Like you get a chain reaction of power, which is good, which like is fun when it
It's just
happens.
the chance is too low. It's like a 1.5% chance. It's like
I just
it's
insane.
like
it should
one
be way more, but probably have less power associated with it, right? Just so you feel it.
it flows better, yeah. And the given that's like pretty much what you said. Like that's the problem. It's like a cake. It's layers on top of layers of RNG, and like that has the tendency to become a fucking nightmare so fast. And yeah, that's basically like you said what they can do. They need to increase like the proc rate of all these things happening, but lower the damage. So it's just happening more frequently. So you're actually like getting the gameplay out of it more so than just the numbers,
I
Yeah,
think
while
because
also while also having the damage or whatever.
I think a good solution to like, because like to me, one of the big points of like, okay, this is just stupid, is you can only proc Avatar outside of Avatar. Um, so it's like you don't even benefit from the 50% increased chance to proc a lightning bolt. I think if you let, I think if you allow your like the warrior to proc Avatar during Avatar, it gets significantly better
and then
Should
maybe
because
it
should
would give
instead of
like
being
one
like
Thunder Blast instead of two because it's so
I
rare.
don't even think it I genuinely I don't think you need to nerf anything because Mountain Thing kind of sucks. Like numerically it's pretty bad. Um and partially part of that's because of the RNG. And I think if you just take remove this line that says while Avatar is not active, it just gets enormously better because you can proc Avatar during Avatar and chain that into more lightning blasts and like
Yeah, that one line creates a lot of
yeah,
problems
it
for like
creates a lot of friction.
for no reason.
Because imagine every single time you're in your burst, like let's say we're talking about our current tier. Imagine every single time you're in your burst, if you don't wait for Avatar, like imagine someone doesn't wait for Avatar to fall off from Odin's Fury, and then you just don't get Avatar when you press it. Like imagine how bad that would be, or how bad that would feel.
Yeah.
It's not the same, obviously, but to like equate it to our to something current, it's just
Yeah,
it
the
feels
principle
bad
is the
when
same.
like you're
Yeah,
doing
the
what's
principle there.
yeah, it feels
Or
bad when you're doing something you're supposed to, and it just doesn't work, right?
yeah, you just get punished for it. Yeah, I think if you just remove the while Avatar is not active, like lightning strikes have a 10% chance to grant you Avatar for 4 seconds. I think that on its own is a fine line. Just remove the part where it's Avatar has to be off your character. Because we spend a solid amount of time in Avatar. I think it's something like
It's
20% or
also
something.
it's also a contradiction of I'm gonna pop my cooldown to increase my damage and
Yeah.
also lower my damage. Like it
Yeah,
doesn't
it's
make any
dumb.
sense. Like
Well, though that's
I
actually
I
one of my
think
main concerns. Good.
I think having that like think about doing like a high key, right? And you pop your avatar and you're like, "Oh, I'm going to pop off." And you get a shit ton of lightning bolt procs and none of them increase the duration of your avatar. And now you're just sit here like, "Okay, well, if those had happened outside of Avatar, I'd be fucking pogging out right now." I
Yeah,
think you just let the RNG like what they're trying to do is like prevent like super high swingy shit. But instead they just made it feel worse. I think you just let Mountain Thing be a high swingy fucking ridiculous spec in Mythic Plus because you're never going to play it in Raid. Like
literally what it's designed for.
it's
It's
yeah,
designed
it's
for
a
like
Mythic Plus
Mythic
spec.
Plus and open world
well,
content, like being able to just AoEing, like that's what it was designed to do. So
it felt Mountain Thane when I first read it as well. Like I saw Mountain Thane and I went, oh, this is for prot. You know what I mean? Like you read it and you go, oh well, this is just
It's
a
a
prot
yeah, it's a
class.
prod thing.
Which actually, like the more I like talked about it and thought about it, I'm like, okay, no, I feel this for Fury too. You know,
Yeah.
um, but
It
it
fits
also
Fury, but you can tell it's designed for prod.
but
100%.
it doesn't have the because one of the things as well is like imagine if you could hypothetically have Mountain Thane for arms, it wouldn't have the hypothetical problem of if you were talented into Spiteful Serenity and that increased your avatar duration, and then
Yeah,
Mountain
then
Thane,
it would feel
you
like shit.
completely dodge that potential problem just by it not even being available. For that
Yeah.
because then you go into the issue of like, oh well, if my class doesn't have 100% recklessness uptime, it just feels bad to play, right? With how Fury is felt sometimes. when you don't have that high amount of rec uptime.
Yeah, it does feel
Um,
like shit if you don't have good UF procs. That said, like, yes, Avatar of the Storm sort of creates the same problem, but I don't think UF has the same problem in like Mythic Plus as it does in single target, and I think that would be the case for Avatar of the Storm as well.
yeah,
Because like, I mean, everything's percent chance based in yeah, it's the same as it's literally the same as UF, but this procs on multiple targets. I think having dude, Mountain Thane in AoE like in a high fortified key, just like having a fucking like 40-second long avatar on one pack, god damn that would feel good. And like in theory, you would be doing a shit ton of damage. Probably not the case at the moment because like it's alpha and nothing's tuned correctly. But like, oh my god, could you imagine have like a fucking 10 to 15 mob pull? You're just like thunderclapping shit. Lightning strikes are going off everywhere, and you just have
Kind
like
of,
a 45-second duration avatar.
it's
God damn, that would be sick.
kind of what I like about Thunderblast is it kind of helps give more damage outside of your cap
Yes,
yeah,
because
that
Fury
too.
has always
It's
been
very
target
nice.
capped, but it has always been given tools to kind of get around it.
like Odin's
Where
Fury
you
or Roar.
Odin's Fury, Bladestorm, Thunderous Roar,
Ravager,
Ravager, like you've had
Bloodbath.
there's plenty of examples of being given tools to allow you to go beyond your cap, and that's kind of what always has made it feel rewarding, at least to me, is timing stuff like that, right? Well, you can do good sustain while within your space of 5. You have when there's so many moments in this game where you are past that and you can't just be useless. So they give you those tools, and that's what makes it fun,
Yeah.
I guess, to me.
Yeah. Is there before we move on towards like I guess the better segues to like the Fury trees or anything else you want to talk about for Mountain Thane?
Um,
Reach.
Seismic reverberation is actually a good talent for Mountain Thane, which is pretty sick.
I I like the approach to again how they're switching. They just make you switch Thunderclap and Whirlwind instead of having both, and it doesn't create button blip problems. But that same idea and design is just not being given to arms.
Yeah.
So that's a
Um,
positive.
and before moving into the Fury tree, one thing I think is interesting to that at least mention because it's definitely been talked about is they have said on record they're not happy with the current situation regarding extended melee range. A lot of warriors, especially since we're obviously using two-handed weapons, which all have extended range, have spoken about this, especially people that play multiple classes, right? You play a class like Outlaw Rogue, or you play something like Ret Paladin, which is like big man, big sword, right? It's kind of a one-to-one there. Different flavor, but the same thing. Um, Warrior was never seen or was never given that treatment or never saw it. I don't think it was something necessary to add to it, but as a general thing, how do you feel about the extended melee range and how it kind of interacted with the game?
I want to know why the class using 2 kitchen knives has more range than me with 2 pole arms or 2 giant swords. It literally just like physically makes no sense. And
I I
the answer
don't
isn't even to just give every like. Obviously, it would just be nice to have it on every spec, but then it's like if every was, then they design the game around that, and then it just like we
it
go
just
through the
doesn't
cycle.
matter.
Like it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. It's just
I
I
think
don't
what they're doing now is the correct path. Like make it
know.
a
I
it's
think it
pretty much like Rogue exclusive now, right? Like they
I
removed it from Feral.
Survival Hunter might keep it. I'm not sure.
does Rhett
Because
still have.
I think
um,
Ret might.
well,
I don't know.
the other thing about Ret is it's not even necessarily like crusading strikes increase their auto attack range, and they just replaced their builder. So I think it's a little different. It'd be like if Annihilator gave us 3 more yards. It wouldn't make sense, but it's just there. But Ret's also a little different where they're casting spells, right? So their single target spender, which is it's like Templar's Verdict,
Templar's
is
verdict.
20
Final.
yards. Their single target spender is 20 yards, and they have a ton of tools like Blades of Justice or judgments that they have to use to actually still build and spend off of their target. And I think that's very good and thematic for their class. I'm not going, oh, I wish we had our range slot back and I had a fucking ranged builder when I was out of range to press. Like I think that would suck. Like I need this bow and arrow because it does more damage so I can build. Like it wouldn't make sense in the current game as it is when they removed the like ranged and the relic and the totem slots from the game. But I do I do wonder if they
I
could. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just like they either just should design the game around not having it, which is like what they're going for the most part, but which is just better. But I just don't like, two examples I can think of are the shark boss in Freehold and uh either whatever Garrosh or not Garrosh, fucking Grommash or
Or
Lothar and
any character
Dominator.
that's just got a ground targeted AOE around, right?
Well, it's like they both technically, like realistically, like both of those bosses, they pretty much just Bladestorm, and like you are just barely shy of being able to hit them, and then like the other two classes in the group can. It's just like why, like
I
Yeah.
do think they
it just feels,
should
I don't know, just
if they design 5 yard AoEs, I think they should give classes like 5.5, maybe 6 yards, because being able to position correctly to get that
Yeah,
benefit while
that's
also
good.
being on the edge of taking damage from misplay, I think is a lot of fun. When
like
you like the
that's
shark
fine.
boss.
Like, yeah, like that's fine. Like I'd rather have them do that than me just being like having to AFK for 3 seconds. Like
And
I think
that's not even
I
considering. Sorry, go ahead.
I have no issues with long arms if they didn't design the game around it, but they kind of started designing the game around it, and then the specs that didn't have it just suffered.
it just got
Like
cancer.
if you
It
if you
just
look at Nimue, that's like a prime example of a boss where it's like if you have long arms on that fight, you're just like fucking big chilling the entire time. Like you're actually just like piss vibing through the entire fight. It just doesn't matter. Nothing's dangerous. And if you're like a 5 yard melee, you're like dancing like a fucking freak, and you're like sweating. There's fucking like blood on your keyboard
That was actually one of
because there's just
my
like
favorite
beams everywhere.
bosses. Yeah,
I really like Nimue. Maybe if
I
they
liked
designed it
it
to
for
like
that reason.
it's just like the fact that there's 8 yard classes that it's like it's just not a fight for them. And like yeah, stuff like the freehold shark boss or the blade storming guys, like don't do that shit, man. Like why are you? It's just like arbitrarily making like some classes better than others because why not? I
And,
guess.
and that's also disregarding completely. I haven't talked about it at all. There's probably honestly not much to talk about, but as a warrior in general, talking about parry, and
Oh, it's
then
cringe. It's
because
bad. It needs to be
I
gone.
did because I made a video talking about it the whole time, where it's like, all right, all classes kind of interacted with this system where you had dodge, parry, block, glancing blows from vanilla, right? And then the casters also dealt with resistances at the time, so they had partial resist, full resist. They could just straight up miss. They need some kind of spell hit, right? Um,
yeah.
but those systems kind of were in tandem, where it's like, okay, these guys deal with this, and those guys deal with this. But where we're at now, all we have is parry left. There's nothing left in the game that is actually a significant detriment to your class potentially. Like there's like the clip I showed was Garms on Sarkareth, where the boss turns and casts something on someone, and then he just parries Colossus Smash, and that could be the difference between killing that boss and execute, especially with execute focus class like Arms. Um, but not to talk about parry too long, but I do think that one of the main things they could do to actually make it better is your main class abilities just need to be whitelisted from it. Because you look at any class that is a tank, and everything a tank does is whitelisted.
You
Because
know
the
what's
tank's
fucked
going to be in
up?
front of the boss. Because everything is whitelisted. They don't have parry chance. They don't have miss chance.
You know what's super fucked up? Back in BFA, they whitelisted Siegebreaker for not being parried, but not Colossus Smash.
And that, dude, you can parry Warbreaker.
Oh yeah, it's bad. Parry just needs to be gone. I think they just need to remove it. I think it's an outdated game mechanic. Just shouldn't exist.
Retail WoW is not fucking D&D anymore. Like, do you like that kind of shit? Like, they have
They've
three
got
other versions
Classic.
of WoW that they have three other versions of fucking Classic that you can go play if you like that stuff. Like,
And they
And
actually have the means to deal with it too. Like,
because
you know,
the main
they have hidden expertise. They can get around it. We
yeah,
cannot. We just
because
have a baseline 5% chance to randomly have our ability do nothing.
the fun part too is like they have actual like audio feedback too. So when you get parried, you
Oh,
just
it's
get mad.
horrid.
You just get fucking pissed. You hear that dink, and you're like, no.
I remember
No.
I had a week aura package.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, I know, dude. Some people actually play with game sound crazy.
weird.
I had a week aura package that every time you got parried, it like there'd be some text on your screen that just said parried, and it's like, dude,
That is actually
I
like
didn't need to know
that made me
this.
go terminal after a
Oh
while.
yeah,
Like I'd just be
it's
so
bad.
mad because like I think like
Um,
it
yeah,
being in the
it's
game, it just needs to be a lot less impactful. Like if it parried white hits, which would impact your rate, your resource generation, therefore making you want to position correctly for like min maxing. But they just kept it in as flavor. It would be okay, I guess. But I don't think many people like
they
the
just
parry
need to
as a
get rid of it,
system.
man. Like, stop
It's just
punishing me for
they
playing the boss correctly. Bosses like
they're not gonna
Smolderon.
not design boss. They're not gonna design bosses around it, and they shouldn't. So they should just get rid of it instead, and they can
Well,
keep
well,
like
Well,
I
they
don't know.
have done that. So some of the bosses like Volcross and
yeah, they don't have
can't
parry
they don't
because
have
you can't be
parry,
behind them.
and bosses like Rashok and Smolderon, while they're channeling, can't parry either. But the realistic situation where you're standing behind the boss, waiting for the charge, moving into it, and then doing what you need to do, that's not really a realistic situation in Mythic rating, right? Like it's possible and it is min-maxy,
Well,
but
I
in
mean,
terms
like
of
these
like what
caps
you're
are bosses.
doing, it just
But
seems
just,
bad.
I don't know. It seems like it's more work to individually flag bosses in specific scenarios to not do it than to just get rid of it. Like then they don't have to fucking worry about it, and then I don't know, then everyone wins, and
Everyone's happy. Like,
it just
it's
like
just not dog shit. And it's like I don't even think you can make the argument of um like, oh yeah, spells do 20% less damage because they can't miss. But it's like, okay, how many times are you getting parried during a fight that it would amount to a 20% DPS loss? Like
and
it's
even
just like every
still,
once in a while your spell just doesn't hit for
and, re- and regardless,
arbitrary reasons.
generally, and regardless, casters and spells are generally flagged and tuned to do more damage because they have to spend time channeling it and
Yeah.
cast. So it's like
It's just stupid.
that argument falls flat. I don't know.
Um, oh, I wanted to say something about Mountain Thane before we like move on to the Fury Tree.
Mhm.
The defensive nodes and the utility nodes are just all bad. They just all suck.
Yeah, the
Um,
4, is it like 4% for 5 seconds?
yeah, for Thunder Blast, 4% DR for 5 seconds, and the 10% max HP increase for 5 seconds. And Storm Bolts and Storm Shield, all of them are garbage.
Like I
They're
could
just
yeah, I could see some
they're all
application for
shit.
Storm Shield where I mean it's obviously not great and it like gives you a reason to
It's
take
like a
intervene.
fucking 5% HP like EHP shield. It's disgustingly bad.
Yeah.
It's
And
absolutely atrocious.
Stormbolt is just going to DR your shockwave.
It's just yeah, it's just random
it's
storm.
just
It's
it's
just
just
bad,
way
man.
worse in every regard. I think they might I could actually see
It's
them completely
Don't
it's
be
just
changing that in game.
surprised.
it's
Don't
weird
be
to me. Like
surprised if you see people take Storm Shield and not have Intervene talented. That node is literally dead.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's like just something they should just give to the class again. Like they gave back Berserker Rage, which is nice. Now that my G key has purpose again. But
Yeah.
same thing with Intervene. It's just like why I don't know.
The
They
last
should
time
just
that
give
thing
that
felt
back.
useful was during necrotic weeks as arms.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's just
obviously it
like
has a lot of PvP applications, but
intervene just needs to be like redesigned as a button, I think. Just like make it not intercept melee and ranged attacks, or make that a follow on. But like
make it like a
the
PvP
risk,
talent kind of thing, maybe.
yeah, the risk of you intervening your tank during raid when you like are using it as mobility is just way too high
And
because you're just gonna die if that happens.
and
You're
your
just
tank's
dead.
going to be in the right position because that's what all the tank does, right? He just positions. So
Yeah,
it's going to be
it's just bad. Yeah, bad design. Nuke those two talent. I don't even necessarily mind like the defensive talents being bad because like Fury is kind of unkillable right now anyways, so it like doesn't super need the defensive value. So it's like that's fine. You can keep those being dog shit. But the utility node actually just serves no purpose and it's horrid and it needs to be redesigned, I think. There's actually I don't have a single good thing to say about it.
yeah.
Like unironically nothing, which is like pretty impressive because like there's a bunch of other bad nodes in Warrior that like at least have some sort of like, you know what, this isn't that bad all the time. But like these are actually just bad all the time.
Yeah. And moving to I guess now moving to the class trees, moving to the Fury tree, since we've been talking about Mountain Thane and Slayer. Uh, I don't think Slayer impacts Fury nearly as much because you're kind of going to that node because of Ravager Hurricane
Yeah,
kind of
you
anyway.
just go there all the time. Yeah,
It doesn't help that like we've mentioned the Deft Experience node being a travesty. On top of it, gatekeeping Odin's Fury, essentially killing that talent altogether as well. Um, One of the things that's we've also talked about is Bloodthirst. It could have 2-hit options. It could have more crit. It could have more innate crit. Because a lot of the weirdly enough, a lot of the synergies for Bloodthirst are crit focused on the left side. But speaking of the left side, we have the white
United
elephant in
Fury.
the room. We have the weirdest addition to a talent tree that I've seen in almost every single class and kit. Like imagine if like Windwalker monks had a talent that you took that just if you didn't equip weapons you just do more damage, but it was just always worse, right? Like it's single-minded fury doesn't make sense. They have buffed it over and over again. They've given it its own talent and follow-up talent. Baked the follow-up talent into the talent itself and it's just bad. And a lot of people like I don't know exactly where the interest for this thing comes from because if you wanted to play two-handed one-handed swords, why aren't you just playing like outlaw rogue, right? Like but if they
It's
wanted
it's
it
it's
just
just a log thing, like because Fury didn't get Titan's grip until Wrath of the Lich King, so it's just like classic slash BC type of mentality of just wanting one handers. Like I get it. It's just transmog. Like
I
they
mean
just want to use one handers. Like
they could put that talent in its current rate where you gain bonus attack speed, bonus attack damage, and everything else. You could bake Annihilator into that thing by itself, put it into the class, like take it out of the class tree, put it in the spell
just
book
give
with all of those buffs, and people still wouldn't play it. Like it's just
but
there's it is
yeah,
not
just
only is it objectively bad, which it's fine if there's something not great in there, but it's also making the bloodthirst side of the talent tree worse by existing because it takes up a
it's
path slot and it there's nothing good there for it. Like it's
just
just
yeah, it's the same mentality of what I was saying with anger management. Bladestorm Ravager being in every single spec tree, it's taking a slot in the tree that you're just going to play anyway. Except this case, you don't play it, but it's soaking up a spot that could be innovated on. And like you said, they could bake this shit into the kit already, like it has been in the past, and you still wouldn't play it because having to farm 4 weapons is not fun.
Yep.
yeah, and even
I,
and
I
even
Also,
if
don't
they
have
even
much
if
to
they
add.
made
It's
it
just bad. It
yeah,
needs to be gone.
even if they balanced it and it was somehow like good,
or
who
they
the
gave
fuck
us
wants
like
to
special
farm
weapons
the
like
fuck wants to farm 4 weapons? You really want to do that to be
but
viable in every scenario in the game? You want to farm 4 weapons? What other classes that like no one else has to deal with
yeah.
this?
Well, this something that is so we did talk about
Well,
gladiator and
I guess
gladiator
it's just
stance.
it's actually just Frosty K because you need one
Yeah.
handers and a two hander now.
Even
But
that's less than what we would have to do if SMF was like competitive.
Well,
yeah,
the other
because
thing
three is
too,
smaller than
yeah.
4.
Well, if
Yep.
with
True.
gladiator
3 is
being in the
smaller than
tree,
4.
one thing all of us have obviously seen in this is like out of game, like in the warrior discords, is you see people that play prot want to like play fury or arms, but obviously they don't have a weapon for 'em. So they say, "Oh, can I play fury? Oh, it's one-handers. Oh, it's strength. I guess we'll play one-handed strength fury with single-minded fury because it's there, right?" But it just feel maybe it's there for that, so like people that play prot can like flex to it. But
Yeah, I
it just
mean,
feels weird and awkward.
the only thing I have to say is fucking suck it up. Like, Prot Paladin exists, Ret exists, they do the same shit. Fucking suck it up, grind your two-hander, fucking play the spec. Right? Like,
If they removed it and they gave prot, for an example, a two-hander and a shield, like they just make gladiator a capstone that basically everybody would take, right? They gave prot a two-hander and a shield, and then warrior essentially could only be played with two-handers. Do you think they view it negatively, or it could be viewed negatively that essentially there's Ross DK left that would only be using one-handed strength weapons? Because
Well, I mean,
that's it, right? It's just well, I guess it's Prop Paladin and Prop Warrior and Frosty K. are the only ones that use one-handed strength, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't give a fuck, man. Like
Mm.
I genuinely I have no cares about the one-handed sword discourse. And honestly, I think most prop players would welcome that gladiator thing. So like I feel like
I mean,
so many people have been asking for the two-hander plus shield combo for so long.
I've said this for years. Like, I'm not even like a huge Pro Warrior player, but I play it enough to where it's one of my
You,
specs, and I care about it. And
you
like,
don't need to farm a weapon for it. Like,
it would just be cool. Like, I don't even give a shit about the farming part. Like,
No, it
that's
would
not
just
that
be
big of a deal to me.
sick.
Like, I mean, I clear the, we clear the raid fast, so like I just get one from farm, so it's not a huge deal for me. But it's everybody else that has to deal with it that sucks. But I just want the transmog part, like two-handed sword and a shield, two-handed axe and a shield. Like,
Dude,
it's
fucking
epic.
Ash Condor and main hand, shield and offhand, like that's sick. But
yeah,
also it like
Elementium Reinforced Bulwark and Reborn Ashkander.
yeah, it's just fire. But like it also provides Fury and Arms players an easier avenue to explore prod as well. Um, and like yeah, you could say the
I mean,
inverse about SMF and one-handers, but I think there's a lot more prot or Arms and Fury players than there are prot players. So
and
So,
it's not even like that big of a deal because it's not like people would say it would fix one problem but create another by like, okay, only two other specs in the whole game care about these weapons. It's not a big deal because everything just scales anyway. So the one-handed swords that you're making for rogue and all the you just make them switch to strength. Like any one-handed sword that you design for outlaw can just be used by the other two specs because it would just switch. It would just be strength if they looted it, right? Like,
yeah,
yeah,
that could be an
so
easy alleviation for.
it would just fix that problem already. That way they don't like completely forfeit this one weapon type in the game because there's also like people like it's also the transmog 2 part, right? Like, so
And
there you
then,
go.
yeah, I guess so. Talking more specifically about the Fury Tree, we mentioned Frenzy before, and Frenzy
Groupie.
being just a problem because just not
They,
swapping targets being bad for you just isn't a great. It just doesn't feel good. It's not a great design. It just feels like a detriment.
Are we gonna
Um,
talk about problem
I
talents? I have a list.
which talents?
Problem talents that are just problematic.
Fucking send it, dog. I have a little notepad over here, and most of my notepad was hero talents and intros, and then I was gonna kind of freeball the spec stuff.
All
So
right,
send it, dog.
hack and slash bad needs to be nuked from the game.
And
It just can't exist.
and
If what
hack and slash is the one that gives you a raging blow
rampage
proc
gives
per
raging
hit
blow
of
charges.
rampage. Yeah.
yes, yeah, so it's like basically guaranteed you're getting not guaranteed, but very 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 close to 100% chance that you're just getting a raging blow proc every time you press rampage, which like the reason that you pressed bloodthirst was like at least so for the like this is speaking from the standpoint of current Fury, right? So like from BFA onwards, it was like you would use the priority was basically two charges of Raging Blow, you press Raging Blow, one charge of Raging Blow, you press Bloodthirst, and that was it, right? Like that was the priority. Um, this basically guarantees that you're never pressing Bloodthirst because you always have a charge of Raging Blow. You are never out of them unless if you get extremely unlucky, and like that's a big part of the problem. Like why Bloodthirst sucks. Um, is because
Yeah,
you just never have to press it. You just don't. It's a completely neglected button. You'd press it if hack and slash wasn't in the game. It would still suck, and it would probably need to be buffed. But you would press it. And I think if they want to go down the path of what they've said they've wanted to do is like make both buttons pressable again, you just have to get rid of hack and slash. It just has to be gone. And I think to an extent, slaughtering strikes is kind of a problem, but I think if you lower the amount of raging blows you're casting, then it's probably not as much of a problem.
Yeah.
Um,
Slaughtering strike. I guess it's a kind of a completely different thing, but the amount of percentage amps within the warrior
yeah,
like class trees as well, having something, and also slaughtering strikes once again is buffed through onslaught, which then is just
yeah.
another
It
slap in the face for Odin's Fury behind its already impenetrable wall.
yeah, it's just like there's too much raging blow support. Like you have tenderize for which gives you like the three slaughtering strike stacks on onslaught. and you never run out of raging blow charges, so you basically have infinite slaughtering strikes, which means you never want to press anything except for raging blow, really. Um, and again, I honestly I think you would just have to nuke tenderize and onslaught, or maybe not onslaught, but like start again with tenderize. That shit's way too strong. That it's like one of the most
It
powerful
buffs
fucking
your
buttons for
spender by
warrior.
60% for a single button, gives you enrage.
Yeah, no, it's disgusting. It's insane.
Also,
I don't think you need to nerf slaughtering strikes though. I think if you just remove hack and slash, like slaughtering strikes balance point is fine because you're not pressing like an infinite amount of raging blows. You can still get like lucky streaks where you press it like 3 or 4 times in a row, maybe, because of Wrath and Fury and like just reset stuff.
mhm.
But the fact that you can cut Bloodthirst out of the cooldown entirely. I remember I was watching Danmore do a stream, and he did a test on how often he had to press Bloodthirst over like a 3 minute period or some shit, and he unironically pressed it once, and then that led me to I was chatting with Gajeel, and we went and looked at his logs from his Razageth prog during the Crushing Blow patch in 10.0. He pressed Bloodthirst. Do you remember how many times it was?
It was like 18 or 19 casts in a 14-minute encounter.
Like,
It's so
yeah,
bad.
it's so
Oh,
bad. Like, it's just, and all of this is because of hack and slash. It's just a problematic talent. I think it needs to be removed. I don't know what you replace it with though. Um, yeah, it's just bad.
maybe you'd replace it with something that would buff Bloodthirst, because I think there's a previous tier set that would buff the other ability when the other ability was pressed,
Yes,
so it actually would
yeah,
make. Maybe you would press it with something like that, nothing like big, but it would actually like support it.
yeah. It's like
Um,
okay, you press Bloodthirst or you press Raging Blow, you get benefit for Bloodthirst, and vice versa. That would be pretty good.
speaking of tier sets as well, and they said they're going to keep them into the game. One of my, I don't know if it's really a concern, because basically every tier set's like, hey, you're gonna play this, and it's like, yeah, sure, that's fine. I haven't played that before. Like with Annihilator and that kind of stuff, I didn't mind it honestly, but with the tier sets potentially affecting the hero talents as well, with certain hero talents obviously pushing you one direction or the other on what buttons you want to press, how negatively do you think that could impact people's preferential play styles going forward? Because it's just another potential limiter to player power, depending on what the talent trees or the tier sets do.
I mean, it doesn't change anything in my opinion because at the end of the day, they're designing them around the talents. So it's like
That's
it's
true.
like it. I don't really see it as any different. Like, but if it's like so heavily gating, like one spec just never sees play, like I don't know. I mean, like
I mean, they
that
have all
doesn't
those
seem
tuning
that
knobs,
doesn't
right?
seem out of the ordin. It doesn't seem out of the ordinary to me because that's just how they've always done it. They design tier sets around some kind of something in the tree that either doesn't get used or they want people to try out or use, or whether it's the talents we have now or the old mob talents, like or the old like 7 row one choice thing.
Yeah.
I
That's
don't
fair.
I don't have a problem with it as long as they actually take tuning seriously. Um, like I wouldn't mind if they incentivized us playing Mountain Thane for a tier or Slayer for a tier because I like the fantasy of both, right? So like it doesn't really impact me. Um, and the same goes for Colossus for that matter. I don't really care. They all seem pretty cool, so it doesn't bother me. But I also understand that some people are like, you know, kind of cringe about their interests and only commit to one thing. And like that's fine. I think you're cringe for it, but that's fine. Um, so like I don't know. It's probably best if they don't, but as long as they take tuning seriously and like don't do some shit where it's like, okay, Mountain Thane and Slayer, there's like a 10% DPS differential, and then they make a tier set for Mountain Thane, but it's only a 10% increased DPS or 10% DPS increased tier set. So it's like, okay, now Mountain Thane is just equal to Slayer, and I've gained no DPS for my tier set. That's like
Yeah.
in situations like that, that's bad. They can't do that shit. They just have to tune shit correctly, and it's fine.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter so much.
But yeah, I guess focusing more on gameplay in terms of with how they've changed the Fury talent tree to where well, speaking just basically of the Fury tree, we've talked a lot about that 20 point talent row where you're very gated on what you pick. And then what you do pick, you need to make sure you're investing heavily into. Uh, Deft experience, we've mentioned multiple times, is obviously one of the problems there because even just percents of mastery, which are just percent damage gains, aren't even good enough in that
Yeah,
node to fight against the other two, like the haste and the crit chance. Um, it just feels very. It feels like it one theory once again, like kind of like the main warrior tree, almost feels like it's picking the talents pick themselves, where
oh
you
yeah,
just kind of you're
100%.
just kind of taking what's good, and then you go, okay, well, I'm gonna take this, so I'm gonna take this. Well, I'm gonna take anger management
It's
instead of reckless abandon because we're doing that. Like I maybe I'm wrong, maybe I haven't looked at it correctly, but I don't see a single situation between Mountain Thane and Slayer where you look at reckless abandon and you go, oh yeah, like like at what point do you do that? Because Blade Storm for doing more Blade Storms just have so much more of a benefit for Slayer. In Mountain Thane, obviously there's a lot more stuff that's like Raging Blow focus, but it wants you to press Bloodthirst. So are you gonna really want to hit Rampage and hit a bad button? And regardless, those specs have innate CDR for your main talents that you'd play, being Ravager and Bladestorm, separately. So like you obviously just want more CDR for those. So it just seems very odd that
I actually think RA is a really good choice for Mount Thane. And
really,
like insofar as the fact that like the warrior tree is very cookie cutter right now, like you are taking the exact same talents for almost every single build. Right? Like maybe you swap out some like the execute talents for like some bloodthirst talents. That's about the only change you're making though. Um but I do think that there is some potential for reckless abandon to see play because like they very clearly want you to press bloodthirst, right? Like anyone can see that. What makes bloodthirst better? Reckless abandon, poggers.
yeah. And it buffs
So it's like
both too.
if
It's not like it's just
exactly
buffing
so
Bloodthirst.
so you're basically pressing bloodthirst on CD. You're getting another rampage back because our rage jet is insane, and then you're going straight into a crushing blow that does like it. There's like so many modifiers for it in the tree, right? Like there's 15% on the lightning strikes and another 15% on Thorm's Might, and then there's 15% on cruelty and 15% on wrath and fury. So that's like a 60% damage modifier on top of like another 90% damage modifier. Um, that's a lot of modifiers for a crushing blow. That shit's gonna hit like a fucking truck.
I could see there being possibility of that.
There's also like some potential. This is like kind of hard to like verify because I personally do not have alpha yet. But if if you get enough lightning strikes to reduce the cooldown on Ravager fast enough that you get 3 Ravagers in the space of 2 avatars,
And that would be with running that would
that
be
that would be really fucking that's like with RA. So you have like Giga CDs, right? Like
mhm.
you have Giga Rec, Giga Avatar, because you're focusing all of your damage into like a shorter period. Um, that becomes really really good. Like that talent because the other one like Flashing Skies is just poo poo. It's just crit chance and crit strike damage.
But they
Um,
they also doubled that talent too. It used to be 0.5 seconds per
yes, Valajar
forward.
training used to be a
So
lot worse
Valjar is now a
with the one
full
second. Like
second on top of the amount you're getting from AM
it's
potentially.
it's basically just like can you get 45 lightning strikes in the space of 1 minute or
You
like a
wouldn't
minute and 45 or minute 30, right?
you
Yeah,
wouldn't want to play Valajar training with AM because then you're gonna desync
correct.
Ravager from Recklessness. You'd
Yeah,
only play it with
That
RA
is true.
in the theory of like you're having a static Rec and Avatar cooldown, so you can maybe get depending on how the tuning is on how many you're gonna get. But I only realistically was gonna see like you pop everything on pull, then you'll get a Ravager, and then you'll get it back in time for your next set of Rec and Avatar. That's like kind of how I can see it going playing out, but we don't know yet. So, or I
yeah,
don't know yet. I mean,
pretty much
I'm
that.
sure I'm pretty sure that could be tested on alpha, but I don't have it. So
I also do not have it, unfortunately. Most of my information's been like watching Dan Moore's video and stuff and just kind of looking from the outset.
Yeah,
To
this
be
this
fair, there's not a
specific thing would
lot
take like
there.
a
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's not a
it would
lot
take a
there,
lot of
and it's very
testing.
buggy, so it's not like we're missing like a ton, but it'd just be nice to have
Yep, for sure.
access to. Uh, is there anything else specifically theory wise in terms of like pathing or other problem talents that you see?
I
I
think
mean,
that
the tree looks like shit. If I'm being honest, like aesthetically, it's just not very
It's
pleasing.
like someone took nibbles on it on both ends too, on the class tree too. It just feels,
with
Yeah.
the cuts look weird, but eh,
but
Um,
that is a visual
looks
thing.
just put more
they.
power into the BT side of things, I think.
I think that they should. Obviously, we all want Frenzy nuked, but I think they should just nuke Frenzy, do something else in that slot, and then give the haste that we're losing from Frenzy back into because
Rampage.
we now have the choice node with
Yes, I
a
forgot
different
about
and
that.
we have two different enrages now, which
is that thing even like
we,
interesting though? It's just we're gonna pick the better one. I think having the
well,
option
what
might
I'm
be nice,
saying is
but
currently, from what I can tell, you're just never going to play the haste one again. So they should just give the frenzy haste back to that enrage, where because that's what it was in BFA. It was 25% haste. They took 10% haste away going into Shadowlands, and that's what it's been at. So they should give the frenzy haste back to that and give that back. That doesn't equal 25, but you know what I mean. Just
yeah,
give back
I
the
see what
haste
you
from
mean.
frenzy to frenzied enrage, so that do you want 15% more damage during your enrage, or do you want 25% haste? And that would help balance that back out. Because currently, like to me, you're just gonna play powerful enrage all the time. Like
Because like
there's no
15%
contest
damage,
there.
there's just like the move
Like
speed is nice, but there's
like
15% haste is not 15%
you're
damage.
you're getting
It's
15.
pretty
You're
close.
you're getting 15% damage on top of a second longer enrage, and you just really what this choice node says to me is it just affects your stats on your gear. Like powerful enrage, you just put more haste on your gear to make up for the loss in enrage that you have the race. You have that haste permanently instead of only when the buff is up, versus having the haste during enrage only. Then you would stack more mastery on your gear. That's really all it says to me.
Because normally we build primarily haste mastery on our gear anyway, especially early on in these seasons when the stat DRs aren't in place. But I think one thing it might do is it could negatively impact Bloodthirst of all things, because if we're needing to build more haste on our gear, that's obviously a stat budget we're not putting towards potentially crit or even versatility. Um, which I think verse is generally like a better stat in most situations, but then if we're looking at bloodthirst, obviously losing potential like crit stat negatively impacts the rest of the bloodthirst side of the tree as well.
I think that powerful enrage gives bloodthirst more purpose because you have less haste to just spam rampages as much. It slows it down, yeah, but because it slows it down, you have more GCDs between rampages, which gives bloodthirst.
Yeah.
More value,
So
just artificially. Yeah.
with assuming no tuning, it gives it artificially some more value without any tuning. But obviously they need to tune it. So,
Yeah, it just needs to be better. Like, I
but
think at
yeah,
a baseline, it just needs to be better than Raging Blow. So you want to press it on cooldown.
I personally like powerful enrage because I would just rather have the duration, and that way I
I
can play with a static haste value that never changes.
That
I'd rather
is
just that's just my personal preference. So
that's
there you
actually
go.
one of my largest negatives about our current tier set is running double wafting devotion and having such a massive fluctuation in our global cooldown randomly just feels bad. I
If
don't
it's
like it at all.
like with that and lust, like to me with haste, with playing BFA, Shadowlands, and Dragonflight, to me, playing Fury, like I'm at the point now where I feel like it has too much or too little, and it's to me it's because of this.
There's just too many too many ways to access additional
To me,
haste.
to me, powerful enrage is exactly what I wanted. Fucking get rid of the haste and give me a longer duration instead. That's
It's
like
basically just like Legion Fury, right? Like
it,
that's
well, it was still 4 seconds in
yeah,
Legion,
yeah,
but
yeah. But
with
I
the
mean, that's
Nighthold
basically
tier
what you're
set,
getting at.
it was 5.5 because the tier set gave a second and a half, so it's roughly equal to Nighthold, which is like perfect. It's what I wanted. So
All
there you
right.
go.
Well,
And I think it, yeah. So
yeah.
I think you need to remove Hurricane. That just put more power in the base spells. Hurricane's kind of
Hurricane also creates a lot of annoying tuning.
It makes
Yeah,
you
problems.
automatically can't have a strong blade storm
correct.
because hurricane
It's also
exists.
it's also your all of our other abilities too, because it's giving us a buff to make all the other buttons do more too. So they could just get rid of Hurricane and give the power back to the base button it comes from and everything else in the kit. Also, yeah, I agree with hack and slash. That's creating a lot of the problem with the huge imbalance between Bloodthirst and Raging Blow. That's creating part of the problem. Vicious Contempt being 2 points is
Pretty
just
bad.
horrible. It does not feel good. It's just, why is this 2 points? They should just bake it into 1 point, even if it's like 1 point and it's
40%
only
maybe.
30. It's like it's 30% instead of 20, instead of 50 for 1 point, because 50 for 1 point is pretty good. So to help balance that back out, just make it 30. I think Cold Steel Hot Blood is too weak. The dot is just it feels like you're playing one trait in BFA to like the damage it's doing, which I don't like that personally. It just feels weak. The more powerful component of Cold Steel Hot Blood at this point is just the extra rage, which I think it should be the other way around. I think the bleed should be what you want more than the rage, especially with how they're trying to like tone down rage generation.
Does the
That's
does the current iteration of Cold Steel Hot Blood on the tree give rage? So I
yeah.
think it's just the bleed and the
It,
healing.
it's
Am I wrong?
it's no, it gives 4 rage. It gives 4 additional rage from a bloodthirst when you crit. That's how it's always been. You probably just didn't even notice it because
I
it's like
I, I actually did. I'm checking it right now. I legitimately didn't notice it.
it. I have the tree up right now from live. It does.
Four
It's
additional
the Cold Steel Hot
rage and crit. Yep,
and
crits. Four
inflicts.
additional rage and gushing wounds. Wow. Yeah,
Yeah, I think
that
it should be the
I
other
didn't
way
even.
around where
Yeah,
I
I didn't
don't
even know it gave
necessarily want
rage.
them I don't necessarily want them to get rid of the additional rage because it that's part of what makes it good, but like I think more power can be added to the bleed to where I don't think it should be like triple BFA level, but I think two trait level BFA equivalent is good enough.
Gotcha.
Uh Blood Craze is just bad and should be changed. It just is garbage. I don't like it. It's literally just bad luck protection on a button that doesn't do damage anyway. Obviously, we all know Deft Experience is horrible. Odin's Fury, I think, is just like, this is coming from someone who played Legion. Like, this button fucking sucks. Like, it was fun in Legion, and it was only good in Legion because of the amount of modifiers put on top of it. That button by itself was nothing, and I think people forget that.
Yeah, because even
That's
like
just it's
even the
same thing
best
with test.
talent. Sorry, good.
Yeah, same thing with Test of Might and BFA. Like, yeah, that shit was still the best Azerite trait through the whole expansion, but like, it only really felt good in fucking Nyalotha with 80-90% haste. Like, that is what made Test of Might good, not Test of Might on its own. It's, you know what I mean? It's like the same
Yeah,
mentality. Like,
because
this
it's
thing on its
feels like
own
a
is
glorified
not
whirlwind
anything.
when you press it half the time.
Exactly. Like, the animation is cool. Obviously, we like that animation. It's
The
cool.
animation's still fire and
Um,
it doesn't even do fire damage
Also,
anymore.
also, Odin's Fury, they completely gutted it in the pre-patch of Dragonflight. It didn't have square root scaling at the start, so it did its full damage no matter the target cap, which is I think is what it should be because that's like the whole point of the button. But and before people say this is overpowered, this is on a spec that is locked into 5 targets no matter what. So having a 45-second cooldown that can hit everything that does like really not even that much to be honest. Like this on live on Dragonflight season 3 of Keys has been the most miserable shit this tier set, and
Yeah,
it's so weak. Like even
and
with the
that's
tier
with it
set,
getting buffed 50% by the tier.
yeah, that's with a 50% increase from tier and all this, and being able to stack more mastery. It still does piss damage and
On
just does not compete
on top of
on
that,
on
everybody's
mass
running.
AOE.
Yeah, everybody's running Dancing Blades instead of Titanic Torment, and
Yeah,
and that's with on top of an attack speed steroid with
yeah,
Annihilator too. Like it's just
yeah.
like
It's
I
just
I think of
Odin's
a very
Fury is
funny situation where someone plays like single-minded Fury with Dancing Blades with Slayer and they're like just attacking a billion times a second or something weird. Like I feel
but
like there's some niche garbage with that, but
In my opinion, if Odin's Fury is going to stay in the tree, they need to remove the square root scaling and allow it to do its full damage no matter what. And I know that's not how they really design the game anymore, but there are still some things that exist in the game like that. Mainly multi-daughters. They don't give a shit how many targets there are. All their dots are doing the same amount of damage no matter what.
And they're getting buttons that
They get
dot
and
everything.
they get
Like Shadow
and
Crash
they're
literally
getting
dots everything.
that, and they're getting resources from it too. I think us having a burst button on a 45-second cooldown to help keep up in situations like that is okay. I think even with that, even if you did add that, you still wouldn't play it because it just the shit that you have to go through to get it.
Yeah.
I think that Reckless Abandon in its current form is fine. They should probably revert it back to how it was, where it gave 2 stacks. I know they
I
changed
agree
it
with
to
that.
1. They changed it to 1 to get it to work with whatever the hell this rate is, Mirage Still.
Just
They-
so that
they
you
literally-
wouldn't be doing Rampage BBBB.
Yeah,
Rampage
they did
fuck
that.
up with Beth,
It's
yeah.
just to
Like,
fix the crushing blow problem from season 1 because of the
Yeah.
set.
Yeah, I get that, but that should be either go back or they can just redesign it. That'd be fine. Depths of Insanity is fucking useless and terrible and will never be played ever.
Yeah,
So they should
and that,
either change it or just get rid of it.
Yeah, 20% chance to gain 4 seconds of recklessness versus just getting 4 more seconds of recklessness when you press the button seems like the weirdest trade-off
I
I've
mean,
ever seen. I haven't seen anyone
Yeah,
talent that once the whole
even
in any content.
even in Shadowlands that fell off quick. Like it was Depths of Insanity in Shadowlands was this for a little bit, but it fell off quick.
it's such a shame too because the icon for it is so gas.
But
It's such a good icon, man. The fucking berserking icon, so
Wasn't that
bonkers.
the old blood craze when you got crit, you got health back vanilla icon? Wasn't it that one?
I have no idea. I just know it's troll berserking.
Yeah, it's
That
that
looks
one.
cool.
yeah.
I think Unbridled Ferocity probably needs to get nuked from orbit.
That's
I know that's
20% chance
super.
to get
Yeah, the
wreck every time
20%
you hit
proc
rampage. Yeah.
It's
or
controversial,
onslaught.
but
It's a controversial take. It's a hot one for sure. That shit needs to get fucking obliterated.
Well, I don't think that's too controversial, really.
I think a lot of people like the rec procs, but I think one of two things needs to happen, right?
It just needs to be more
They need to make it consistent. So it's actually every 4 or 5 rampages. You could even make it every 6 rampages. Or
I'd rather have the I personally would rather have the random chance than some scripted build up, because if it doesn't work out on the next fight, it's just I don't want to have to think about playing around it personally. I'd rather just fucking roll the dice.
okay, my other solution was just drop the fucking proc chance so it doesn't feel so feast or famine and feedback loopy.
Because
where it's you get more procs, which gives you more procs, which gives you more procs, which gives you 100% rec up time. Make it so there's actual make it actually feel good. You know,
do you
have
think
maybe an
its
8%
chance would be better? Because I correlate Unbridled Ferocity directly to the Fire Within from DH with their additional with them getting additional ammo auras at just they just get 25% chance have another ammo aura, which just gives them another momentum window, or inertia window.
As far as I know, they don't like that either. They don't
imagine if DH still had to play Fodder of the Flame. They were so mad about that button that they got rid of it.
I don't know. Unbridled was
I guess there's 3 options. You just make it fully deterministic, 8%. Or it was 8%.
I think it was 8% in BFA, and it was still ridiculously good.
Yeah, it was a really good fucking proc, and it felt impactful. Whereas now it feels more impactful when you're not playing AM, but when you're playing AM Onslaught Ravager shit, it's just it feels worse to not get it than it feels good to get it.
Because the season 2 playstyle, you essentially just have 100% uptime on deck.
It's very close. It's 90% plus pretty commonly.
And then it's probably also hard to balance. Well, one of the things that I guess sucks about Rec 2 is it's spell crit. It's not even actual.
Yeah, I think it should just be actual crit. I don't know why it's spell crit. I don't know why fucking what is it, like Ret Paladin has real crit on their wings and we have spell crit on Rec.
It's because of Legion. It's it's because of
Yeah.
Battlecry.
It's
That's
cringe.
why.
They should make it
Yeah.
real crit.
But moving,
I agree.
yeah.
Agree.
But I guess going from there to, honestly, I think Arms is certainly the loser. Like
Oh yeah,
it
Arms
might be
sucked.
good gameplay,
I'll
but they
be
have done a lot of
I'll
things to Arms that makes it significantly worse than it is now. So
I'll,
go
I'll
ahead.
I could fucking go off all day about Arms, man. Like this spec has been so disappointing the last 6 years. It's just like it amazes me how they've had critical moments in the peak of the design of this spec of, you know, hey, you guys really like this, so we're completely throwing it away. And they've done this twice. Probably
Three,
3 times.
three
Like
times.
Which I mean, would you? I mean, we have whatever time we want, so would you want to iterate on that? Because I've only played
like
Arms early on in
so
Shadowlands with the Remornia cleaving, but like that's all I know.
so the big one probably it's hard to really choose which one is the bigger offender here of going from the end of Mists of Pandaria into Warlords of Draenor, or going from the end of Legion into BFA.
Because
Both of those transitions were just
Catastrophic.
unbelievably like a cataclysm level of not the expansion, but
It was
cataclysmic
horrible.
levels of despair of just like how did you guys fuck this up? Like 5.4 was awesome. It was perfect. It had like everything it needed, and Legion was probably arguably better. Like after the rework to Focus Rage, because I mean, I'll fall off the fence right now. Focus Rage is shit. Like
wasn't that something you just fucking macroed in like almost
it is
everything?
literally it is literally just heroic strike that doesn't do damage. That's all it is. It was a
Yeah,
very
that's terrible.
is a very cancerous play style in my opinion. There's Focus Rage loyalists, and like no offense to you guys, I just that shit is ass. Like no thank you. But post the fix of that. So like we're talking like Tuma Sargeras and Antorus, especially Antorus too. Like the play style it had everything it needed. People liked it. You go to BFA and it's all gone. So, but just this spec is talking about right now. Like it just needs a lot of work. I don't know.
That
Shit
one of
needs God.
one of the things
It's
that they actually like that's very tangible, at least for me, is the removal of the connector nodes from the versatility talent, the victory talent, to the
Yeah,
side parts of the tree. Like why like we are already dealing with a insane amount of talent point like constriction, I would say. Especially when they're one like this is the second or third buff to Skull Splitter, and then with the change to Thunderous Words, amping all bleed damage by 30% in the window, making it really potentially making Skull Splitter a really good single target thing. But
two target option.
one of the things I think uh I mean, there's obviously the rage thing to talk about, which I think is probably what we'll end with after, just kind of talking about the overall like rage difference, which none of us can really feel because we haven't like played on the PTR. Um, but the oh, brain,
point
but oh yeah,
constriction.
yes, yeah. So with Skull Splitter being better, and then maybe Thunderous Words being a thing, and having all of that, the talent points are just rough, and
And
specifically for Slayer the talent points seem kind of ridiculous because of the lack of access or required points needed to get to that Blade Storm tree. You end up just not being able to take single target talents in a single target build because you have to go grab Blade Storm. It's very weird. Um,
it, yeah, it's the tree is really bad, and just overall, there's a lot. I mean, I'll go through it really quick as fast as I can, but I'm gonna start with the tree. Blood Surge is obviously not very good this expansion because we've had so much overflow. So hopefully this will stay and it will be useful. And War Within, we'll see. Uh, the Fair Battle change going into Dragonflight that they have kept, where it requires two targets to function, is just not good. Like, and I'm not even a huge like FOB fan, but it just like I don't get it.
Going into the
It's just
patch notes, they did also straight up nerf Whirlwind by 33% as well.
yeah, it's just like this is
They
just a
also
bad talent. And
they nerfed Blood Surge, I think. I'm pretty sure it's
No,
25% on live, right? 25% chance to grant you 5 rage.
I don't know the percent chance. I don't know if the
on
tree has
on
them.
live it doesn't, it says 10% on the live tree
10%.
on Wildhead,
I thought it was 25. I don't know why. Maybe I'm thinking of something else.
but
But also
Yeah,
going like
it's the same.
the Sword of Storms nerf or change, I guess. That talent is just not good.
I don't think the change version is good either, but I did not like the original version either. So to me, that's still a W.
Yeah. Well, the original version,
That's probably going to make people mad, but
the
that's
original version was just a band-aid fix to the fact that we had a billion rage and just needed to fucking dump it.
yeah, it's I don't know. Yeah, FOB change not good. Impels whatever. Uh, I don't like having 2 charges of overpower, and I don't like Dreadnought. I don't like I don't like AOE overpower. Not a fan.
I mean, Strength of
I
Arms
just
as an
it
option
it
just not good.
makes it further adds to the fuel. It further adds fuel to the fire of arms if it has 4 fucking buttons, 4 rotational buttons to do AOE. Like, is that really necessary? What other spec in this game uses 4 core rotation abilities to just do AOE that are not tied to cooldowns? Like, is it just me that thinks this is ridiculous? Like, why do we need Thunderclap, Cleave, Whirlwind, and Overpower to all AOE?
And that's also disregarding needing to press like sweeping strikes and shit.
Exactly. It just adds a lot of annoying just clunkiness, and you go from this jumbled mess in AoE and you go over to Fury, and I just push Whirlwind every 5 globals to AoE, and it's just
It,
like
it
it's
also
not even
doesn't.
like
Yeah.
it's not even just a skill thing. It's like it's just not fun. Like, I don't know, I don't like. So for me, for arms, like, they either need to remove Thunderclap or Cleave from the game, and just like they need to give either or of what they keep the inherent properties of the other. My personal solution is you keep Thunderclap and you get rid of Cleave. That might make people upset, but hear me out. You make Blood and Thunder also apply deep wounds, how it did in Mop. So you have one AoE button that is applying your dots, and they should remove the target cap, which because it's just dumb. Like, Howling Blast does not have this problem on DK or Unholy with their disease spreading. They just push their thing to apply their dots 1 time, regardless of target count. So remove the 5 target count, allow Thunderclap to spread both bleeds, and then you can make, that has a cooldown with lower rage cost that has a cooldown, so you use it on CD, and then you can dump excess rage and AoE with Whirlwind again. And then obviously you would, in my perfect world, you would remove Dreadnought.
Well, some people have also recommended just making Cleave almost like a modifier or something where it's just when you hit Mortal Strike, you just
Uh,
cleave.
yeah, I've also
I don't
seen
know if
that
that's
too.
good. I mean, that's letting you do
That
your
one,
single target and AoE without like
that
fucking
one,
up them
that one
both.
also works. Like, for me, that works as well. I personally would just rather see it gone, because then they can take that component of it spreading deep wounds and bake it into Thunderclap, so that but and if the argument is that but that makes Thunderclap too powerful, it's like, okay, I don't know, having 2 different bleeds that get applied by different buttons is just, I don't know. That's not fun for me personally. I don't like that.
Well, speaking of
But
overpower specifically, like there are a ton of overpowered percent damage modifiers that also lead directly into Dreadnought. And then if you're thinking about maybe not playing Dreadnought, your other option is currently the terrible, terrible Strength of Arms.
yeah,
If you're playing Colossus, between Strength of Arms, Impale, and then the talent that gives you increased crit damage, you would have 3 different crit damage modifiers to overpower, and you're still taking Dreadnought just because it all damage affects it. Um,
yeah,
but even then, the current play style as well, even in AOE, to me is also kind of annoying. To where it's like for Mountain Thane Fury, for as an example, you're pressing Thunderclap and you're getting procs and you're pressing Thunderblast and it feels good and you're ignoring armor, whatever. But for Fury once again, or for arms, one of the issues I have with arms is how many percent modifier on top of modifiers you're dealing with. You're dealing with overpower modifying cleave or MS. You're dealing with executioner's precision, increasing the amount of MS damage you're doing. In the Colossus tree, you're increasing the percent damage of your bleeds or the percent damage of overpower while you have Colossal Might stacks. You have things like Battle Lord, which are increasing your overpower damage as well as resetting the cooldown of Mortal Strike or Cleave. So in AoE, you could feast or famine on just Cleave procs from Battle Lord itself, thereby influencing you to want to press more overpowers to get more cleaves because they've shifted some of the power of Warriors or Arms as AoE into Cleave. They buffed it, and then they buffed it again on the PTR patch notes. Then there's Unhinged to consider, which is another 20% chance to reset the cooldown of Mortal Strike or Cleave.
You mean
Just
exhilarating blows, right?
Yeah, exhilarating blows. Sorry, but it just seems very, very odd that I don't
It
know
is
why.
very bloated
I
with
don't know why
modifiers.
I don't know why a spec that's just supposed to be built around simple do damage not only has so much RNG involved into it, but has so many percent modifiers. Like why don't our buttons just do damage? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that's actually kind of a good point. Like Arms, I feel like pretty historically has been like pretty simplistic rotation wise. Like you don't have a lot to manage. You have like Slam, Mortal Strike, and like Overpower or some shit. Some sort of replacement there. Maybe you have Whirlwind and Cleave too. But then like most of the skill comes in from just like managing your rage correctly. And it feels like we've just done a full 180 where it's like now you just have like 5 million rotational buttons that all have different priorities at different target counts, and you're just flooded with rage and just constantly have to
It's
decide which buttons to
yeah,
press based on your rage generated and the number of targets that are out.
And
it's a
And
then
it's like you have to
mess.
run a fucking like math equation in your head to figure this shit out. It's just cringe.
because now you're even like one on towards the end of one of my Slayer arms video, I'm looking at the tree and I'm going, well, do I want Blood Surge for rage? Do I want is Sword of Storms any good because you get a free whirlwind, but I'm doing whirlwind damage, so I need to take Fervor of Battle for priority damage because I'm doing that. But is that being cleaved efficiently with either collateral damage or improved sweeping strike? It just seemed warrior like
It
arms specifically. You look at Fury and you go, okay, I
it's
builder
straightforward.
and I spender, and then you look at arms and you go, even if I have the things built, do I fucking spend them? Like it's like obviously like we've done the research and kind of know what you're pressing or when you press kind of thing, like you said with
It's
different
It's
target
just a
not.
counts.
mess.
But
It's
it's
a
It's
just
not
fucking
that.
mess.
It's
it's
not
just
that hard to learn it. It's just not fun.
it
Like
just seems
it.
unreasonable,
It's
like
it's just
for what
it's
it
just
should be.
button bloat. Like
It's
I don't know.
it's like a giant Frankenstein's monster of all of the worst iterations of arms. Like that's literally what we're looking at in Dragonflight and going into the War Within right now, currently.
Because
Like,
yeah,
you know what's crazy is that the best parts of the class are the ones that are from Legion. Crazy, shocker. Who would have thought, man? Like, Spiteful Serenity is literally just Titanic Might from Legion, which was just your.
that's
It
probably
might as
the
well have just
explanation.
read your Colossus Smash has 100% uptime. That's like basically what the
Yeah.
talent said.
So you didn't play Legion, right, Maddox?
I well, funnily enough, I played Legion, but I only played Fury because I
Okay.
just wanted to
So
play Fury.
so basically, Spiteful Serenity, they've already tried this talent once with this same mentality on it, and it did not work.
The
And
same
they
negative
changed it.
detriment.
They changed it in Legion because it didn't work. So this talent, it was called Titanic Rage. It basically
Oh,
doubled
yeah.
the duration of your Colossus Smash, but it reduced the effectiveness by like 20% or 30% or whatever it was. And they ended up they caved in, and they just took the negative away. They just doubled this CS uptime. And it was the best talent for all of Chuma Sargeras, but in Antorus, it's even with a guaranteed 100% uptime on CS, it still got beat out.
By anger management.
And by no by Fervor Battle, or what the hell was in that node?
I think you're right. I think it was Fervor.
Because that's what you played. You played the FOB
Yeah,
world,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that didn't play Titanic Rage.
yeah, yeah. AM was a level 100
But
talent, I think.
but TLDR, Spiteful Serenity is just a talent we've had before with those negative effects that they caved in that expansion and got rid of it completely, and it was only positives, and it was still beat out in the final tier of the expansion. They poured it in again. Granted, they threw Avatar on top of it, but like, you
I
guys
think
tried
they
this
just
once already. Like,
yeah.
if you're gonna make Spiteful Serenity good, take the negative portion away and cut the duration down. Like, give CS Avatar 50% duration,
And it
and there's no
has so
negative.
good. Yep.
And there's no negative. Like,
And it's got way more potential interest as well, considering the change that In for the Kill will now match
yeah,
your
like
CS duration.
Oh yeah, that's
that
like
will. I mean,
oh
granted,
god.
that change combined with the rage nerfs, like that will just push it into the meta guaranteed. But like, I don't know, you guys got to do something with Spiteful Serenity, because this just
It's just
I
poopy.
don't like any talent with a give and a take that horrible or like that steep to me. I don't know. That's just like,
I feel
what
like most talents just
I don't
shouldn't
know.
have a give and a take to begin with. Like you
It's
shouldn't
like,
be looking at a talent and it should have a negative on it. It's like, brother, what are we doing here?
It's like why are you spending
just
the point, right? It's
just
like
drop the duration. I honestly don't even think you need to drop the 50%. I think you can just remove the downside and drop it to like 75 and it's probably fine. I don't think you even need to go to the 50%. But like yeah, that downside is just horrific. It's the same, honestly, I forgot to mention this in the Fury Tree. Storm of Swords. Or Storm of Steel, rather. I don't think Arms has it.
no.
But the Storm of Steel talent, that also just needs to get nuked from orbit, just redesigned. I
which one
think
does that do again?
it's
It
the
could be
2 charges of Bladestorm Ravager. It like doubles their rage
Oh
gen
yeah,
but
because
reduces their damage.
the arms equivalent is you don't get 2 charges. It just isn't the arms equivalent like Dance of
Unhinged.
Death, where you get like additional
Yeah.
duration on the next cast if it helps
It's
kill.
Kind
not
of.
it's not
It's
in the
not
choice
quite the
node,
same.
but
Yeah.
it's there. Yeah,
Yeah, just
It's
the
not quite the
the
same. It's a little
icons
bit
look
different.
similar, is why I put them together
but
for some reason.
yeah,
But yeah, that the Fury talent needs to die. Sorry, just hopping back over to that. I feel like they need to give Fury its own version of Unhinged. We'll just leave it at that. Also buff Unhinged for arms. Just like literally, this is the Tomb of Sargeras tier. Just revert it to before it was nerfed. Give it four Mortal Strikes for Bladestorm and 2 Mortal Strikes for Ravager.
Because
I
as it
don't like.
stands,
the
because
It's
reason
dog
why
shit.
they tuned Unhinged the way to this. Unhinged is what it was in that tier, but that was tuned around having 100% crit chance windows on top of like actual amps of
Yeah, but this was like
it's
after the 3rd nerf or some shit, right?
yeah, like where we don't have a cooldown that guarantees crits anymore. I think you can increase the amount of mortal strikes it does.
I think this version is just the way it is because like it got nerfed to 4 and 2 in Legion, and then they nerfed it again going into Shadowlands because they brought it back as a legendary. And I think it was because of like PvP concerns and like granted it'll probably still be a little bit AIDS in PvP to have your Bladestorm cast 4 mortal
I mean,
strikes on the person you're Bladestorming, but
they can just tune the mortal strikes from
yeah.
unhinged
Yeah,
specifically in
exactly.
well,
PvP. Like,
interestingly, one thing they actually did with Unhinged in the patch notes is because I was doing PvP, I was actually looking up a lot of different builds. People stopped playing Unhinged in a lot of against a lot of compositions in solo shuffle because it would hit pets. So now Unhinged actually hits your focuses your primary target if they're in range when the cast hits, compared to just hitting whatever's
Oh,
around you.
that's interesting.
Because
it
because
used to be
Unhinged
around.
currently actually used to hit pets. So what people were playing in Arena, which was what I was playing to get to 2100, was we're playing Hurricane in Arena. We weren't even playing Unhinged, because if you're fighting anything with pets, you have a chance to just essentially deal no damage with the talent point. So it was not worth taking. But they
Yeah,
did
it just
change it to hit the. One thing that's actually interesting as well is Bladestorm is a faster cast time, but it does 2, whereas Ravager, obviously you can cast during it, but it does 1, but Ravager lasts 12 seconds. So having 2, even just having the same amount, like having 2 Mortal Strikes hit during a Ravager, but it's spaced out in 12 seconds, is not nearly as bad as having more during
No,
a
and
like 4-second
I
Bladestorm.
it would allow the awesome gameplay from Tomb where you can stack 2 stacks of Executioner's Precision, put Ravager down, it casts Mortal Strike for you to consume the stacks, and then you do 2 executes again, and then those get consumed again on its own from the Ravager.
And that'd be like your execute rotation, kind of.
Yep,
Oh,
that's what
okay.
it was in Entorus, or not Entorus, Tomb. It
Because
was
I
awesome.
because Ravager having access to it is great even for Colossus. But the thing that's weird is once again you run into the issue because of the pathing problems. You actually can't take Ravager and Hurricane without like losing something. Like you have to lose like Battle Lord or Bloodletting
Yeah,
or Sharpened Blade.
there's
With
way too much constriction
I
in
think
the
what
bottom
they
half of
could
the arms
do
tree.
is if they swapped the positions of Battle Lord and the what's the stacking execute big hit thing that you have to
Juggernaut or Executioner's Precision?
no, it's on the left side. It's the
Oh,
stacking thing that
Fatality.
yeah, fatality is also really weird where you will want to wait to consume it until a test of might window to get the bone to strength percent damage on the proc. It's fucking terrible.
Yeah, it's
That
cringe.
talent is
They need it.
fucking awful.
Tom is not fun, and Fatality is a cringe,
They
awful design. Like,
honestly, if they gave us back the because they actually took it away. The original routing is that Valor and Victory talent into the sides of the bottom
Yeah, the
talents,
Bloodletting and the Sharpened
and
Blade.
it's only 1 point to get to the Bloodletting and Sharpened Blades. If they moved Fatality to the side and then moved Battle Lord to the bottom, which Battle Lord is way more impactful than Fatality, I think it deserves that final slot. Then you would be able to path to you'd be able to lose a talent point like you'd probably lose some of the crit from whatever talents previous to it to get into the tree, but you would lose a little bit of that to get into fatality, but you could still have your proc rates and stuff with bloodletting and then battle lord at the bottom of the tree with the pathing from valor and victory. So then you could give up some of those points on that side of the tree while also having access to your ravager and the follow-up talent, rather than having to essentially be like, well, do I just lose sharpened blades and executioner's precision, or do I lose fatality and bloodletting, which currently you lose fatality and bloodletting because the amount of stacking bonuses you're getting for mortal strike on top of Mortal Strike getting another 20% from the Colossus tree. Executioner's Precision is a crazy strong talent in those situations. So you're not going to lose that on top of Sharpened Blade also buffing Mortal Strike. Like it's very it just feels
I
like I like having the option, but it also feels like what you're losing is so detrimental. It feels wrong. If like I can't like the only word I can put to it is like the way it's designed
You're getting
currently, it feels
punished
wrong.
well,
for
like
wanting to take the
because
good talents.
because Battle Lord and Executioner's Precision actually change and affect the rotation and way you play. Fatality is just this boring ass debuff that you stack that gets consumed at the end of the fight. Like, I don't know, those two things affect gameplay, and shocker, that's what people want. So
And then that's not even considering on the right side having the damage variation of Ash and Juggernaut in the tree. I don't know. So TMY, Agard, and Peepaw they made like a little arms manifesto thing, and one of their negatives towards arms currently is having a Fury Legion legendary in
Yeah, yeah.
Ash and
It's
Juggernaut into the arms tree, which also I don't isn't there like it's not great until a certain stack point, then it's like the best thing
yeah,
to hit outside of
Jug-
consuming Executioner's Precision.
yeah, the Juggernaut from Arms is what it was on the War Swords. They need to remove it. It is just like
it's bad gameplay. It's not
it's
fun.
just it just further propels the spec, like you said, into just doing nothing until the end, and it's just, I mean, we've been through this cycle so many times of arms doing nothing until 20%. Like, look at Warlords of Draenor. That spec literally did nothing until 20, literally nothing until 20% outside of HFC. Once you got the HFC tier bonus, it fixed it. But it's just
Also, something that I like I don't consider it until it happens, but it's actually a negative to take Massacre as a talent because they wanted the cool and they wanted the condemn animation with it, but depending on the situation, if you outrange your target, your execute just doesn't fucking go off. Your execute
Yeah.
just literally doesn't work for a talent point that's supposed to benefit you. It honestly, it's one of the worst feelings where you hear the like first 0.3 seconds of the condemn animation and then it just goes away and then you just didn't hit a button and you lose a global and execute did no damage. because
Not
they
only that,
because
but
they
there's a
fed the
delay
damage
between
into
the
it.
damage and the animation.
Yeah,
It's
they
disgusting.
like I know they thought Condemn was cool. I thought Condemn was cool, but I don't think Condemn's cool enough to actually negatively impact my gameplay
No,
to that degree.
it's just obliterate animate the newer obliterate animation as well with just a little red thing on it, which is cool, but like I don't know. I don't like it.
I almost missed the old animation.
Because like basically, if you're executing anything, you almost never take it.
I
Like you're
especially
gonna
miss the
take it.
old execute animation on Fury, where when you don't have Massacre, it's way better. You actually hit with both weapons, unlike the Condemn animation. Damn animation's so fucking retarded on Fury.
It looks cool for arms, especially the sweeping strikes. Oh my god.
It's fine. It's cool on arms, but yeah,
It's just the problem that the like
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe they just we're back to the increased range thing, but like, do they just give execute some more range so it doesn't feel terrible as a band-aid fix? Well, I don't think that's great.
I think the fix is just make
You
the
fix the
talent
talent.
fucking work. Like I don't know, dude. Just like fix your goddamn game. Get the
But
fucking get the unfed intern on it.
Oh no,
it just
not that guy.
Just
kind
give
of
him his daily dose of coffee grounds and set him to the task.
yeah, just like kind of like what I was saying too, like going through the arms talents. Like obviously, Spiteful Serenity needs work. And for the kill Test of Might, like Test of Might is, as far as I can tell, most people don't like it, and anyone that does like it, I mean that's fine. It's subjective, but like I don't know,
They're just
Man.
BFA season 4
I think
cobras.
I think they're trying to hold on to something that just like we don't have 90% haste anymore in Infinite Rage. Like this is just not a fun talent. Also, with how much emphasis there is on overpower, it completely goes against what Test of Might's gameplay wants you to do,
Yeah,
which is spend rage, and
that's
you're
the
not spending rage when you cast overpower. So
it's
it's just
just it's the biggest problem that I have with arms as a whole is that the design fights itself. Because even if you're getting a sudden death proc, which should be good, that doesn't count towards Tom, right? Tom Test of Might by itself makes the arms class feel like it's fighting against itself on
it pretty
multiple
much
levels. And
it,
I
it
don't think
just
it feels good at all. But
it goes against like yeah, it just doesn't work.
but my this so for arms specifically, honestly, the Fury style of gameplay I like and I think is fine. But I had a pretty big cook a while ago, which is one of the things that they added in Dragonflight was the empowered system, like the empowered spell system, for the Drakthir for the evokers, like their flame breaths and stuff. I would honestly, if arms received a full rework, rather arms tend towards that empowered system where something like execute you could empower it to 3 to do bonus whatever, but then it could give us a different resource to spend. It could make us more tactical. You'd have different stuff you could spend different things on. Like my idea was the evokers have like their pips of I don't essence, I guess. But for warriors, obviously, we're merit based, and fighters, you would have like little, like actual, like physical medals. It's like, well, what if I spent 3 medals on a big execute in this proc window, yada yada. Um, in terms of like reworking arms as a whole, do you think something along the lines of that would be interesting? It would, of course, could be potentially detrimental because obviously melee and channeling things are generally don't go hand in hand for most things outside of like Fists of Fury, but even then you're pretty free flowing in that kind of movement.
I
Well, if
think
they
if you
reworked arms, what would you like to see?
I think if you wanted to do something like that, you would be better off going for like the combo strikes thing that Rhett has. It's like the Blades of Justice or the Templar strikes.
It's the choice node with
Yeah.
winning strikes.
Oh, where
I
you have
think if you
Templar.
wanted to go that direction, you
It's
wouldn't
the
do
Templar
Empower, you
spell
would do the
combo.
comboing instead. I
The
think I think
I
if you
think
put
the I don't know. Yeah, just
if you
yeah,
put Empower spells in
adding
the class, I think you'd piss off a lot of people,
and
including myself.
the empowered thing like evoker and then adding another resource is to me that's a no. Absolutely
Gotcha.
not. Personally, like for that, just my opinion. Like
Oh no, for sure.
I don't think so personally at all. I like no to me like bro we're not playing warrior to like think about shit. Like
Yeah.
we're playing warrior to Zug and hit things and not think about it.
I
Like
mean,
that's like the whole point of playing a warrior. Like so that's just my
if the idea is
opinion.
bad, right? Like if I put a turd on a stove and cook it, it's still a turd.
Yeah,
I mean,
I got you. I got
I'm
you.
not putting no steak on there. If it's bad, it's
Yeah,
bad.
like
I don't give a shit.
like it's yeah, just like I don't know, like the biggest change is I just like want to arms. I want all these like dumb hoops to be removed, like test of might, fatality, spreading 2 different dots, spreading 2 different bleeds with 2 different buttons, or like it's just clunky. Like, and it's not clunky in the way that it should be with like hitting really hard. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Even
Like
Bloodborne being a 2-point node as
two
well.
Bloodborne being a 2 point node, like just like
Because Fury even
I
gets a
just
1-point version of it. It's 20% for them.
Yeah.
yeah, it's also a 2 point sync for Prot as well, which is yucky because that's like a huge DPS increase on Prot. Not having double Bloodborne on Prot is a huge, massive,
Well,
as a massive DPS loss.
would you want to talk about Prot a little bit? Because I honestly I don't really partake in it. Literally, I
I
have a
mean,
macro where I just straight up macro every single defensive into the same button, so it gets used. Otherwise, I won't use it, and I just run my random 20s for the week.
I could run a quick Prot because I played it enough. I think
Wait, before we do, can I just like say something about the warrior trees in general?
Yeah,
go ahead.
you're
Um, it genuinely just feels like warrior is like the beta testing for cool shit to give to other classes. Like they give this goes for Fury and Arms, or like Fury Arms and Prod, I suppose. They just like give us a watered down version, dog shit version of a spell, and then they give the fucking super juice giga amped version to other classes. And like
But
this is true for pretty much like everything in our trees. Like
do you have a couple examples to throw out potentially?
I mean, honestly, not off the top of my head. I've like a really, really fucking good one is the sanctified plates thing. Like we have the endurance training, the fucking armor to the teeth, and the avoidance, or the 10% DR in Fury, and then Paladin just gets it for free.
gets
Um,
all of it in one. Yeah,
they got crusading strikes, which is just annihilator, but not in the capstone row, so it's just baseline better. Um,
And it has increased range,
and it has increased range. Epic.
and it cleaves.
Um,
This auto
all of
attacks
our
just cleave. Like, what?
all of our shit's just like hard capped for no reason. I'm sure there's some specs out there that have
that's
increased
just
cooldown duration without a 40% hamper on it.
granted. Like this is kind of what I was saying earlier. Like Ren, Thunder, Blood and Thunder, Ren spreading is locked at 5 targets. Like why?
Because even
And
though
I
it
get
does more
it's a
damage,
tuning,
it's
it's a
capped to
tuning
5.
thing, but that's what I want to see. Like pull the damage off of the bleed and lower it so it can be spread more easily, and put that damage lost into Mortal Strike, or like the button. Like it's the whole point of playing Arms is to see a big dick Mortal Strike crit. Like we're losing that because so much of our damage is put into bleeds, and it's like I I get where this emphasis bleed style comes from, and it's from BFA, but it's just like, dude, we're not playing Feral Druid. I don't know. I don't
Also,
like
yeah, sorry, go
doesn't
ahead.
it just doesn't make sense to me. Like if anything, to me, I would have like to me it makes more sense to see more bleed style gameplay onto Fury, because you're like slashing the shit out of people
Like that
nonstop with
5,000
like
cuts kind of thing.
exactly like
Because
that's
rogues
it
get
seems more appropriate.
poisons and then we bleed you, right?
Exactly. Like that seems more appropriate over there with like constantly fast hitting attacks that like don't hit as hard, but you're cutting them up fast. Whereas Arms is like slow paced, big hits, smashing.
I think that's why people are so excited for Demolish, if anything else, just because it's a button that you hit it and it does the damage. Like
Like exactly. But that's just yeah.
Also, I'm pretty sure if you did the Warbreaker Colossus Smash thing for any other class, they would just get Warbreaker as an additional button instead of having it replace Colossus Smash. Like I
That's
have I find
I
I
mean
find
that's
it
just
hard to
like
believe that
isn't the
that's
paladins
one
get
it's
the
of the
final verdict or whatever that fucking thing is, where it just increases the damage of everything in like a 10-yard AoE on where they cast it?
yeah. You don't really play it that much. That well, you can play it in Another Plus, but
Yeah.
I never play it. You don't ever play it in Raid, but that's another big one for me that I really do not like. I do not like the blunt instruments and ward breaker choice node
That's a
because
pretty
like
bad choice node.
it's just like
I
Well, if
feel
it's
like it
single
should just
target, it's
be.
not even a
you
choice.
you would just
No,
have
it's not.
just in raid period you will just never get to play Warbreaker unless you're just like actively fucking throwing and
It
just
just
like
Trying
Why
to
the
pat
fuck
on
isn't Warbreaker on
Gathia
a
or
choice
something.
node with Colossus Smash if you're gonna have one replace the other? Like it just doesn't make sense.
like granted I know why they did this to fix the balance of like always playing Warbreaker, but like they should do it in another way to where you can actually have Warbreaker be viable
Just
in
make it
raid
an extra
account,
button. I don't know,
like
dude.
where it would actually be good because like right now with the current arms design, you can't have cleave to spread deep wounds on AoE in a single target build. You can't have Warbreaker to do it. So like a good example of this right now is Farak. Like when the two Ellie's come out, then you go pull in all the souls. Like what? I just don't get to buff my Thunderous Roar by my mastery because I literally have zero way to spread it. It feels horrible. It feels awful.
That also kind of lends credence to
Because
your idea of letting Thunderclap, Blood and Thunder spread deep wounds. Like, because then you just
I
have
mean
it all the time.
that would also fix that problem.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. It just like
Like
further enhances that
and
point.
that's what it did in Mop. Like Ren didn't even that's why I love Mop so much because Ren didn't even fucking exist. They removed it from the game. It was just gone. It was awesome, and you spread deep wounds with Thunderclap, and deep wounds just like did damage. It didn't like give you a damage amp.
we even have the choice now, based on like the current pathing, we even have the choice to, in single target as arms, not take Thunderclap at all if we don't want it, because Ren just does more damage on initial hit, which I think is kind of cringe. Where you're like, I don't know, hitting.
Again, this it creates that problem of button bloat again. Like I need two keybinds that do the same thing, but one does it for AoE, and it's stupid. Like it just eats keybinds for no reason.
Yeah, and
Like
speaking,
that's
yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, just God. Sam.
But going on to, I guess
Oh,
arms is
okay.
probably going to be the most. Arms is probably the most impacted by this, but the overall change. Well, actually, before talking about the overall change to Rage's arms, they completely gutted Warlord's Torment.
Yeah,
Like
that's
that
another bad
talent,
Yeah,
thing.
that talent is now so unplayable. I don't even think you. I think you might even, one of the reasons why Skull Splitter might be the meta pick for single target damage is because you can just run Skull Splitter with Thunderous Words and Uproar, and you just don't take the bottom capstone of your avatar tree, because 6 second, like they're like, oh, we buffed it by 50%, but 6 seconds of recklessness. That's also nerfed to 25% rage gain instead of 100%, by the way.
Yeah,
6 seconds of recklessness every minute and a half for an entire talent point in a
that's pretty
part of
bad.
the tree that 7 out of your 10 points are already decided for you might be one of the most bizarre decisions I've ever seen, because I totally understand that you look at it and you think rage economy and you go, okay, that makes sense. But if you're bringing back the amount of rage cost on everything, right? Even ignore pain is going from 40 to 20 rage. Literally everything is costing 20 rage on on
just
arms
like
now.
the overall like rage tuning and like lowering the cost on everything while lowering the rage income is pretty positive in my opinion. Like
I
they
agree.
needed to fix they needed to fix that. Like having an influx of rage like we have now and then having all the spenders be this expensive is just it's bad.
It's
Fucking
it's so
six.
stupid.
I totally agree that
It's really
they're
bad.
moving in the right direction, where like a 60 rage whirlwind just to dump rage, because I mean, once again, we're going back to Tom being
And
the front and center problem here.
that's actually I had left out the other big thing about anger management as well with moving it to the class tree is that it should be the WAD version and it should affect everything that you have. In WAD, the anger management literally affected all of your cooldowns, all your buttons,
So you
even your
even
stuns.
Avatar and stuff.
Yes,
Because
yes,
I think if they, one of the things that I think they could do is, being a minute and a half class is kind of fine, but I would honestly prefer if they did that, if they balance it to a way where we're more like a minute go, like we have a minute
Yeah,
go.
so
I would
that's
prefer
what
that way
that's what
more
it that's
than,
what we were in Legion.
because
That's how
having a
Arms
minute
was in
go just
Legion. was a
feels way
minute.
better because one of the things to consider as well when you're talking about raid buffs and all of this other stuff is if you're talking about a minute and a half go, you're not syncing, like you have no chance of syncing with PI. You have no chance of syncing with Breath of Eons, right? Because they've brought this evoker spec in that's got a 2 minute big burst damage for everybody because most classes are like 1 minute or 2 minute. Like there's some 3 minute stuff like Incarn, but having 1.5 minutes actively works against being able to effectively play with other people in classes from that design perspective, but from that
And
design point.
that's why AM is so popular, because it like is a band-aid fix to that problem of being able to like still do that. And even then, it's like not, oh, it's because I got AM, I'm like the PI target now. Like that doesn't fix it.
Yeah.
It just
Just to like the point of WAD too. At that point in time, I'm pretty sure anger management was like not as like it was. Sorry, not as good is not the right term, but it was like every 30 rage instead of every 20 rage as well.
yeah,
So
it
like
was
it
more
wasn't quite
expensive.
as yeah.
Like
It
yeah, the cost was more in that sense of, you know, the opportunity cost is higher, but you get more out of it. It was more
yeah
expensive to it was a more expensive ticket, but that ticket provided a lot more. And it also didn't allow these desyncing problems in the first place because everything is going to be scaled off of the one thing.
Because like so right now I actually decided to pull up the WAD tree. Um the decisions are between anger management, dreadnought, and ravager is what the choice nodes are
That's
for
not.
that
I
tier.
don't think
Is that
that's not
no,
incorrect?
right. What?
that's Shadowlands or BFA.
Is it? I'm looking at
Yeah,
maybe this thing's
Hold
not
on.
updated.
I'll find it.
I went
I'll
on
I
find it.
believe that's Shadowlands.
WoW
Yeah,
DPS.
it just has
In
outdated shit.
so in WAD, the 100 talent row was anger management, Ravager, and Siegebreaker. And Siegebreaker in WAD was not what it was in uh whatever
BFA.
the fuck, BFA and Shadowlands. It was something.
Okay,
It's complete. Siegebreaker in WAD was, it replaced Intimidating Shout, had a 45-second cooldown, and it was basically just like a chunky hit that knocked targets away. So that was also a really good idea, giving a class that's in melee an ability to knock things out of their attack range. That was really smart. But
I see what
okay.
yeah,
they were going for. At least it's just like Peel, right? But
it like, is it fun in like PvP and like random battlegrounds to fucking knock people off of towers and like the Eye of the Storm middle? Sure, but like, do we really need to make a whole talent for that?
yep.
I don't know. It's just, yeah. But anyway, that's what the WAD choice was at the
Oh,
end.
okay.
Was it was anger management, Ravager, which was a 1 minute cooldown, but Ravager and WAD didn't do nearly the levels of damage it does right now, because in WAD you could have Bladestorm and Ravager, so they had to tune that accordingly.
Gotcha. Um, I guess did you before? Is there anything else to really say towards arms specifically, or
Fix it. It needs God.
We just we
it yeah.
Arms is my favorite spec in the game, and my log history does not show that, but like, man, this is why, because it's not fun. Like, they need to fix it. I don't know, like, people loved Legion, people loved Mop, hell, even like Cataclysm, and like, this is where the peaks are. Mainly Mop and Legion of what people like the most, and Arms, and like, it was good. Like, I don't know, those are like,
I feel like I'd argue 6.2 as well. Like the HFC tier, where you're just like rend fucking Mortal Strike execute, man.
yeah, but that's like pretty mundane, bare bones. I put Rend on and I spam Mortal Strike over and over and over.
That's
That's
pretty
pretty.
bonkers gameplay.
It's pretty silly, but sure, I'll give you that.
Um,
But yeah, that's pretty much it. Like,
it, well,
oh, I guess Dance of Death is shit.
yeah.
Dance of Death is very bad.
Apparently, it's kind of good with Ravager. I don't know the lore on that though.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
this
don't
is
know.
a pretty cool thing. Fucking Merciless Bone Grinder with Ravager, where you can just fucking spam Whirlwind for the duration of Ravager and do 1 million damage. That's pretty sick.
Yeah, I like the way Bone Grinder works with Ravager, but not Bladestorm. There you go.
Yeah, because then once again
That's
it
my
feeds into the Battle
yeah,
Lord
because
procs of cleave and all that crap.
yeah, the synergy there with the Bone Grinder change with Ravager is awesome. I'll give credit there. That is really good, really really good. But other than that, they're
Yeah.
can't
They did
anything
like
else.
they did like 2 or 3 good things, and then just the rest is like
They'll take one good step forward and
like
like 50 steps back off a cliff, and this is where we're at. So
Yeah. Well, one thing that's funnily enough a benefit, not necessarily a benefit to, I guess a benefit to DPS players is the state of Prot Warrior has been not great for seemingly what seems like to be a long time. Um, at least for
it's
this
pretty
expansion. For this expansion,
fairly accurate.
it just seemed like even when the times I've played it, it just I look at every single other tank, and every single other tank either has more utility, has more options, doesn't require the amount of APM a Prot Warrior does, and the amount of procs that Prot Warrior deals with. Prot also, like, I am not a Prot Warrior player, and the fact that Prot's been bad is also kind of good for me, because that means I can play DPS Warrior without dealing with, or considering raid buffs and stuff like that. Um, but if but as not a non-prot man, if you would want to spit just a little bit about the give them some representation, because I certainly cannot represent them correctly.
And I can spit a little bit, but not a ton. As I'm probably not going to be much the best person to ask, but
Yeah, just
I know
something.
enough. I know enough to where it's decent, I guess. I mean, Prot was like insanely broken at the start of Dragonflight. It was really strong, and then they kind of gutted it a bit. They toned it down. Like it did deserve nerfs, but I think it was a bit harsh. And they also, in my opinion, they could have just left Prot where it was, maybe nerf it a little bit, and then they just buffed every other tank to
Well, one of
But
the things a lot of those every tank received is they received new abilities, new talents. All like most of these tanks received something new, something good for them. Even the fucking Bear Druids did. But every time I see Prot Warrior on the like a patch note, it's just an aura buff. Like what? Like I don't like they. It feels like they've done nothing for that spec specifically.
I don't know. I mean, what Prot is really strong against, it is the best, but at the same time, because of that, the trade-off is that it's really weak to magic damage in constant motion and bleeds. And honestly, Ignore Pain feels like it hasn't done anything since Legion to me personally. Like it's because of the way it's capped now, and it also only absorbs 50% damage instead of 90, and it just doesn't stack as high as it used to. Used to be able to like really stack Ignore Pain in Legion, and like even with that, like other tanks were still better. Like that kind. Pro Warrior Legion is pretty similar to how it went in Dragonflight. It was like very dominant at the very beginning, and then it got like by the end of the first patch cycle, middle of the first patch cycle, it like was nerfed, and then that was it. Its time in the spotlight is over.
I heard some stuff about BFA Prot Warrior, but I don't know if that was because of corruptions towards the end or what exactly that
Just
was.
because like most of the damage profile from most of the trash and just a lot of it was physical damage that could be blocked, and the Bastion of Might Azerite trait stacking just made it really strong, and it did a lot of damage.
there were also some like cool
But
essence combos and shit.
the some essence combo, but
And
it still had those fatal flaws of magic damage and bleeds.
probably had some like it being BFA having spell reflect in places like Waycraft's Manor was
Yeah,
obviously
exactly.
super good, but
Just spell reflect is good in BFA dungeons. Yeah,
spell reflect. I hope they never take that button away because that button just owns everywhere. That is one of my favorite buttons for sure.
yeah.
I actually think they need to make it better. I'm like that's not even a bit. Like they
What
need
would you
to
adjust with it?
um give it a follow on that makes it mass spell reflect. Just straight up. Like warrior has a lot of unique utility that's like limited to the warrior. Make some of it party wide. Or
Does
probably
it
not raid
is it
wide,
one of
but
those where
party
it's
wide
like
for
it's
sure.
party wide but it consumes on like one use or something, or like how do mass work?
It was. I mean, it basically just worked how it works now, right? When was the change made where it's like when you reflect a spell, it doesn't remove the DR? That was this X pack, right? I think that was the
I'm not
I
sure
think it
because
was
I use the DR
Dragonflight.
more
It
than I use the actual reflect most times.
Yeah. I honestly think you just like put spell reflect like a row lower on the talent tree and just give it mass spell reflect. But like, yeah, I don't know. It feel even then it still kind of make it a longer cooldown too. Maybe. Um,
Or maybe you could
there's
make
like
it a longer CD with the choice node, basically, like a trade-off kind
yeah,
of thing.
just like do something. I feel like the best way to do is just give warrior more group utility because we really don't have much. Like we have rally, right? Like
And
that's it.
there's like battle
or
shout, but battle shout also doesn't affect like most of the classes in the game.
Yeah. I
that
mean, rally also just sucks in dungeons. That button is dog shit in dungeons.
How did Rally
rally.
not get the buff with like Darkness did?
I have no idea.
I don't know,
I don't
but
know.
I think
That's
the
a
biggest,
good point. Just remove bitter immunity. Put a fucking follow on that makes it better in fucking dungeons. I don't know. Like
or they can just make it do better in dungeon space like
I
every other
agree,
cooldown
but
does.
you know,
But, I mean, the biggest thing that I want, especially particularly for Mythic Plus, that would really give, especially TPS Warrior, more representation is give us Bloodlust. That would
Oh, for sure.
fix
I forgot to bring that up. That's in my
that
notes.
that that would open up a lot of comps. I mean,
Because
even one of the best comps this season was with no real lust. But like, think of
yeah, it
that
was the
comp
Fury
right
double
now,
outlaw.
like a bear Mistweaver double outlaw warrior. You have all the physical damage increases and debuffs, but you have to give up a lust for that.
but like it's
But
like one
just
it's like
I don't know.
even thinking in like thematically and thinking within the bounds of like fantasy in general,
I mean,
every goddamn fight, like Lord of every goddamn fight, there's a guy at the front who starts the charge with a yell. Every
yeah,
time.
Yeah.
All like thematically it fits so perfectly. And
and
with prot being one of the few classes that doesn't bring a lot of utility, having a
it would
tank,
give a tank lust, and that would like not even just for DPS warriors. It would open up the comps for prot warriors too, because then you could run all DPS and a healer that don't have a lust.
yeah, no,
It just
I
like
think
it
Lust just it
opens
fits so well.
it opens up the door tremendously to so much like play specifically for keys. Like obviously giving warrior lust doesn't really change anything in raid, but
No, but they don't
and
really
it
need it
doesn't
for raid.
and
Like
it doesn't do
warriors matter
anything.
for other reasons.
It doesn't do anything for PvP, but specifically for Mythic Plus, which is, I mean, probably it's the most popular thing in the game by far. Like Mythic Plus is more popular than raiding
Well, I
for
think
sure.
even for Raiders, one thing I like just sitting and thinking about, it's like, well, even as a Mythic Raider, even like currently being a trial in Infinity and they have their raid times. I think it's like 12 hours a week, something like that. Even at 12 hours a week, realistic realistically, especially during the early parts of the season, I spend way more of my time in Mythic Plus. Like Mythic Plus, while I consider myself a Mythic Raider, Mythic Plus is the primarily what the game mode that I interact with. It's probably the same for a lot of other people as well, and I'm surprised it's not
It just like,
necessarily catered to nearly as much considering its
yeah,
widespread
just
nature.
and like they could just make like Lust a choice, like just put it in a choice node with Rally, because like you're never gonna like Rally is fucking shit in keys anyway, so just take Lust. Like
That would
there
be
you
pretty
go.
sick, actually.
Like
That's a good
that
choice
would
node.
that would fix
And
that
then
would
you
just
don't need it
open
in
the
raid
door.
because other people have it, so you just take the health
Like
instead.
and like that one thing would just like really do a lot, even if they didn't give us like with like at that point like it would still be cool to have like mass spell reflector disrupting shao, but like we wouldn't even need that stuff if they gave us lust, because then we could run comps. I mean, really what I'm saying is we would get to fucking play the game, because as a warrior you sit in LFG like
Yeah, because like if
like
I got 3,700 this season, so I'll be getting title, but even just like an LFG, like because
it's
that
brutal. Like
most of my stuff comes from like, well, I was just playing the game and oh hey, I guess Noxiv or Tota weren't around, so I'm doing some fucking keys with Ordomist and two rogues and Squish. I just did some keys. Oh well, there's like 40 points out of nowhere because I'm doing 30s that are homework keys for these guys, right? Um, but it's just
yeah, it's
yeah. So
I put
without without
30
having a group of people to
something
play
too.
with.
Like it's brutal. Like I pugged my title in season 1 of Dragonflight, and I pugged it again this season. It's fucking brutal the amount of time you spend in LFG, and like I get there's other reasons to that, but it's just like one of those reasons is a lot of the comps don't allow us to play because of just the meta right now and just how it has been. Because yeah, it's just
Yeah, because even playing with like once again, Aug Evokers played correctly, like for a minute and a half or 2 minutes. That obviously negatively impacts us. If there's ever a slot where we would maybe be in there instead of a mage, we obviously don't bring the lust, right? So I do think that lust would go a long way,
it
and
would go
I think a
so
lot of
far.
these changes, I think one of the important things is a lot of these changes, while they're obviously we play the game a lot, so they're kind of pointed towards people that play the game more, would benefit the overall player base as a whole.
Oh, dude, like
Because I think good changes aren't necessarily changes that are good for individuals, but they're changes that can be good for everybody. Like
yeah,
the
like giving us lust would help other classes too. Like especially physical comps. Like for the most seasons, the comps are usually caster, especially when VDH is the meta tank. Like it's always caster comps that are the meta
I
because
mean,
they can just
it would also be boring, but would you one of the things I've considered as well is changing Battle Shout to just percent damage. It's boring, it sucks, it's lame. But one of the reasons why I would even consider it is it's probably going to be the same buff anyway. But even if you nerfed it from 5% to 3%, that's probably a larger
I
raid
mean it would
DPS gain than it is currently because who fucking uses it? Like
well that and
enhanced
it would just
shamans,
allow us
rogues,
to
and DHs,
yeah,
maybe. Like none of your casters benefit from having a
it would
battle shout and raid to the point where it's like, well, depending on how good casters are, raid comps and stuff, like I could potentially see Warrior not even being brought in some situations, depending on a lot of different factors. Just because like Rally's not like crazy. It's good, but it's not like insane. And then Battle Shout doesn't benefit everybody. So like it just feels like a net negative. Not a net negative, but it feels like it could be
well
better if it
it's
was just flat down.
some of those other things still go both ways, right? Like we don't benefit from Chaos Brand, and there's other specs that don't
That is
too,
very true.
and
That is very true.
also Monk debuff. But it's like generally there's more people in the game benefiting from those two or from Brand than us. Like that is accurate, yeah.
Yeah,
Or
maybe.
there's some classes that double dip on both, like Frost DK for example benefits from both.
Yeah,
Or
honestly,
or
I
uh,
might be kind of
I think Ret I
overstepping.
think I think Ret double dips too because they deal holy strike damage.
Well,
So they
because it's
benefit.
attack power, it benefits their
Well, I mean like
spells.
Monk debuff and Chaos Brand.
I mean, I think they do. I think they do get benefit from the monk debuff, but I don't think. I think most of their damage is chaos branded, but I think they still do some physical.
Well, it's because it's holy strike. It's split. That's what I
Oh,
mean.
true. I have
Holy
to.
strike is physical damage too.
Yeah,
So yeah, just
yeah. But I mean,
that's pretty much like all I've got to say. I mean, it's been a while, so
yeah. No, I was definitely about to wrap this up because I honestly didn't expect to talk for this long altogether, but there's a
Yeah,
lot to say
holy
there's a lot
fuck.
to say about Warrior because I think there's
Yeah.
it's been a staple forever. There's a lot of passion behind the class.
I mean, honestly, like Warrior's probably the most iconic class in the game.
I mean, even in fiction and fantasy as a whole, right? Like just the fighter archetype. Um, but is there anything else you wanted to add or say, or have we chatted our way to the inevitable
Fucking
Uh,
conclusion?
make Second Wind at least a little bit better. This talent is it's so stupid. It's like either completely broken or completely useless, and there's no in between.
I
just
think
make it WAD.
yeah.
Like,
That's
just
like,
make it WAD.
yeah,
Make it WAD
yeah.
second wind.
That's like
What was
pretty much
that
all I have
version?
left to add.
It gave you leech.
Yeah, it
It
was like
wouldn't.
when you go below 35% HP, you get like 20% leech or some shit, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's yeah, because I think the Colossus talent, that's the choice node between ignore pain percent and rally has maybe some use because like I can see big hit,
It's just
ignore pain, rally the second win, but it's also one of the things. It's also another one of those nodes where if you want it to work, you got to take it, right? I mean, currently in the warrior tree, we have the points to grab it because we're kind of like stretching around trying to figure out what to spend points on anyway. But
Or they could just or make second wind how it was in Cataclysm, except maybe take the rage part out of it, so it's not like a damage gain. Just whenever you get hit by a stun or a slow, you regenerate health.
oh yeah, I remember
Work
that because it
too.
used to be that's one of the main ways you used to fight against like mages and stuff back in
Yep.
classic because that level of CC would give you health and yeah, yep. But but shit, man, it's been like goddamn almost 3.5 hours. So
Well,
we
there you go.
yeah. No, I didn't expect it to go this long, but honestly, I had a great time. That's which is my main goal, just yapping about
it
Warrior.
was good little chat.
That was good.
I
Yeah,
actually I never considered putting like the bloodlust on a choice node with rally.
That's actually yeah,
That's an interesting one.
that's a really good one actually because it's they're both very impactful in their own way, and they would make and it would make a lot more sense with how Rally currently interacts in like Mythic Plus.
it would just help the game in all areas of like in Mythic. If in raid, you're still gonna take rally as your raid cooldown because there's plenty of other classes in a raid that can do that. The lust part, but then when you go to do keys, where comps become much more restrictive because of how many different elements are in the game, just giving that to that class, like just it would it'd be awesome because it would
Yeah,
just
no, that
open up the
is
door to like physical damage comps. Like you could run Windwalker, Warrior, Rogue, Windwalker, Warrior, Hunter,
And then just like have
and
whatever the
just
best healer is, like
yeah,
a druid
like
or some shit.
run
that,
whatever healer you want. Because like usually our shaman's not the meta, so that can't bring lust, and it's
Res Evoker, also not
like
particularly good, generally
yeah.
speaking, just because 25-yard range and
Yeah, it's good in season one, Dragonflight. It'll probably be good in Faded too, but it's a Mickey Mouse season, so
yeah, I
but
don't I
no,
don't think I have anything
yeah,
else.
I would
yeah,
There's
yeah,
like
that
some
would
minor tweaks here and there. There's like some minor improvements. Like
but
for some reason, Berserker Shout isn't like a group wide immunity. You have to use it like Tremor, but there's like a million and one different things like that where it's like, okay, this could be better, but it's not exactly pressing. So,
yeah,
yeah, I could
but
really
no,
pick at it all day.
oh
So
yeah,
yeah,
no,
100%.
but I think it is. I think we're at the point where we probably need to formulate some fresh ideas and maybe get something to drink, something to eat. Almost 4 goddamn
uh,
hours.
it's all good.
But no,
Yep.
thank you guys a lot for joining
Yeah,
me.
of course.
No worries.
I had no expectation and had a ton of fun because it's just fun talking to people about stuff.
I got you. I mean, there's not a lot of us left, so hopefully they give us something good so people come back.
Tragedy.
This
But
spec
yeah,
sucks. Get me out.
it's true. Zan's a Windwalker now. That's crazy.
Yep.
Wait, really?
Augers. No, probably not. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see
I mean,
how
shit.
it launches.
Even Apook's going to be a
I know
cat
he's
man.
kitty. He's
He's
kitty
gonna
and
be a ma.
fucking.
If I don't, that's if I don't fuck up my trial. If I fuck up my trial, I've condemned him to warrior. So I
No,
gotta
not
not fuck that
entirely.
up.
No,
They have Zeus
but
Vil Nori also who
Yeah.
can play warrior. So
just put Wonka back on it.
no, dude, he wants to play the Whopper. He wants to play the
I mean,
monk.
he's been talking about playing warrior season 4, but he's been talking about going back to. I mean, maybe play shaman instead because Fury is somehow 40k DPS behind. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see.
But yeah, thank you very much for joining me, and hope you guys have a good night. Do you have any like social medias or whatever you want to shout out if you care about that shit? I don't know.
I am not gonna be plugging anything.
Any
No.
pluggers?
Not really. No,
Um
I
I
don't
don't know.
think.
If you want to chat, I'm in Skyhold pretty frequently.
But yeah,
It's
I
got a
pretty much.
blue name.
I do.
And you'll probably see me type in there and probably put a picture of a cat, but that's about it.
Only if
So,
the cat's being attacked by a knife.
Also, if you disagree with me, I'll ban you. So don't do that. It's a bad idea.
except me though, I can bully you all day. You won't ban me.
Yep. That's true.
All
You
right.
know.
Well,
Yeah, good one. Appreciate it,
Yeah.
bro.
Good
Well,
talk.
good
Thanks
see you
for
yap.
the
around.
invite.
Maybe we'll yap again on alpha stuff as they iterate on it. Maybe not
Yeah.
3.5 hours
Yeah.
long yap, as we've said a lot today.
Yeah, to
Yeah,
be fair, this is like the
we kind of
baseline yap. This
Yeah,
we
is
just
like
kind
the
of went through. We just did everything where we would probably do more concentrated talks like spec and that. Just stick to one spec and that's it.
yeah.
So
But I definitely, if you guys are interested, once we get more stuff out there, I would totally be down
uh,
to do more if we get
I
better
I
stuff.
don't mind. I mean, if I
Cool.
don't talk here, that's it. I'm not gonna go type in Skyhold all day. So
Get drowned out by people asking about single-minded fury for the next like
uh,
4
yeah,
weeks.
pretty much. So
God
Well,
love
I just post
PvPers coming into the PvE channels and
I'll
asking about single-minded fury. Holy fuck.
I'll fucking let's hit this with the key ya and call it here.
Yep, for sure. GN.
Yep.
Good
yeah,
talk.
yeah.
Good night. Good night. Thanks again.
GG's, appreciate it.
Peace.
Peace.